Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, The Ragnarok Hero, Einherjar, by Camdog2. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin a new era. This is wrong. 4-year-old Izuku thought as he hid behind the bush as he watched his somewhat friend Katsuki Bakugo and his friends corner another boy. This behavior was nothing new, as ever since he got his quirk Bakugo has become much more arrogant. Then why don't you do something about it? That boy needs help. Izuku flinched both at the fact the voice was right and its sudden declaration. Since he was born, Izuku was different. 52 times higher than Avenge, with him weighing 7 pounds as a newborn. Many assumed this was due to his quirk, but that was quickly proven not to be the case, but an extreme case of Superman syndrome. This led to Izuku having to spend the first 4 years of his life treating everything like it was made of glass. And then around 6 months ago, the second strange thing started. Voices started going through his head, lots of them. Some of them sounded extremely helpful, others cold and distant. But as time went on, the voices started speaking more and more. Of course he couldn't tell his family about this, they were worried enough about him as it was. The last thing he needed was to cause them even more stress. For God's sake, either go kick their snot-nosed little buttes or walk away. It's not that hard a decision. A bratty little voice barked. But sister, Izuku doesn't need to get into any trouble. Besides, isn't that why Izumi went for help? A more mature but meeker woman's voice asked, getting a scoff from the former. The kid wants to be a hero and something like this is scaring him. Pathetic. The bratty voice scoffed, and that struck a nerve with Izuku. She's right. Izuku thought as he looked down. Heroes don't cower. I've got to be like All Might. Izuku shouted in his head before rushing out and standing in front of the downed boy with a cry of, "Stop." The shout startled the 3 bullies, and when 2 of them saw it was Midoriya, they instantly froze in fear of the monster child, but Katsuki narrowed his eyes. Deku. He hissed instantly and turned all of his attention to the green-haired boy as miniature explosions erupted in his hands. Leave him alone, Kaken. He didn't do anything to deserve this. Izuku told the other boy, who growled as the explosions grew more rapid. Are you telling me what to do? He demanded, and after a moment to swallow his fear answered. Yes, I am. With a roar of fury, Katsuki raced forward, his 2 lackeys staying behind as Izuku saw the small child rapidly approach, frozen in fear, until another voice made itself heard. Ha 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 ha. That a boy, kid. Now knock him out. A deep masculine voice shouted, and on instinct Izuku threw his right as Katsuki closed in to start beating Izuku up. Whomp, only to get sent flying back on his back, groaning, leaving a stunned Izuku to stare at what he just did. Did I really dash? He tried to process what had just happened when something slammed into him. Izuku. It sobbed, and Izuku looked down to see none other than Izumi Midoriya, his twin sister. The 2 were identical, with Izumi's hair in a bob cut. Are you alright? He didn't hurt you, did he? Izumi questioned, looking him over for injuries. Snapping out of it, he managed to smile. Don't worry, Izumi, I'm fine. He promised, only to hear a growling. Don't get used to that, you worthless Deku. He shouted and was about to lunge at them, only to slam face first into the ground. I think you've done just about enough for today, you little brat. Mitsuki Bakugo hissed angrily as Bakugo raised his head to glare at his mother. What the hell was that for, hag? Didn't you see Deku punching me? You should be punching him. Bakugo demanded, only to get another hit to the head. What the language, brat? And I would never hit someone who was just defending himself from a bully. Mitsuku shot back. Bully. Bakugo demanded, only for Mitsuki to grab his ear with a yank as she glared down. Yes, a bully. And believe me, we're going to have a long talk about what we're going to do about your behavior. Mitsuki warned before looking over to where the other boys were, only to see both of Katsuki's friends and the boy they were chasing had run off. Turning back to the green-haired siblings. You 2 okay? She asked, getting a nod from Izumi. We're fine, right, Izuku? She asked her brother, who was about to agree when another voice spoke up. You know what? I think it's time we had a nice long chat. Don't you all agree? An ancient-sounding voice laughed, and suddenly there were shouts of panic. Stop bother. We agreed to wait for now. It's too soon, you miserable old goat. The ancient voice just laughed. Don't care, besides it'll be fun. He cackled, and a second later Izuku's world went dark. Line break. Izuku groaned as he slowly came to and sat up. What happened? He thought, trying to think back to what caused him to pass out. The voices. He remembered jumping to his feet. They were worried about something, and the next thing I know I'm here. He thought before looking around. Where am I anyway? It was unlike any place he had been before. A massive stadium that looks like it could fill everyone in the world. As Izuku stared on in awe, he was unaware of the green light emerging from behind him until the discussion started. See, I got him here safe and sound, didn't I? The ancient voice, with other voices sighing, groaning, or letting out various streams of curses. The problem, brother, is that it could have had disastrous effects on young Izuku's mind. A calmer male's voice reasoned, causing the first one to grumble. Well, anyway, the kid's here now, so we might as well start explaining this to him. Kid's gotta be close to a panic attack now. A laid-back male voice spoke. Izuku, however, was still frozen, unsure of what to do or say, until he felt somehow hug him from the back. Hey, now don't worry, no one here is going to hurt you. A childlike voice promised, and hesitated. Izuku looked over his shoulder to see who was hugging him. The one hugging him smiled. See, we're friendly, he said as he gestured to the rest of the group. Izuku was shaking in fear and awe at the people in front of him. Who are all of you? He asked, his voice barely above a quiver. The youngest-looking man with white hair smiled kindly. That might be a little difficult to explain. Young Izuku, he admitted as he slowly approached Izuku before crouching down. Tell me, what do you know about myths and legends about the gods? Izuku blinked at the question. While a smart 4-year-old, he was still only 4, so all he could do was shake his head. Fortunately, the group didn't seem to mind, except for the black-haired man with an eye patch and the blonde man in blue. Thought the latter stopped when the man in front of Izuku shot him a look. Well, that's perfectly fine, but before we go into that, perhaps we should introduce ourselves. The white-haired man said before gesturing to himself. I am Hades. The now named Hades formally introduced himself. These are my fellow gods, he said as he gestured to 14 of the other men, including the one who hugged. First, starting with my family. We have my brothers Zeus and Poseidon. He started as the ancient-looking man waved excitedly while the blonde looking away in disgust. And my nephews Hermes, Apollo and Hercules. Hades continued. Hermes gave a charming smile and short bow. An honor to finally meet you, he spoke while Apollo threw a few strands of hair behind his head. Charmed, I'm sure, he said, giving a rather smug grin, which Izuku noticed resulted in one of the older-looking men from the other group gaining a twitching eyebrow. Hercules, however, strolled right to Izuku and gave a bone-breaking hug. Ha! To think we can finally speak face to face. I couldn't be more happy if I tried. Hercules laughed and Izuku gasped. You're one of the voices, the one that spoke earlier, the young child exclaimed before his eyes widened as he glanced at the others gathered. Does that mean? He started to ask as Hades with a patient smile raised his hand. All in good time, young one, but first we need to finish introductions. Now please, Hercules, release him so we can continue. Hercules nodded as he gently put Izuku back down and made his way to stand with the group again as Hades cleared his throat to continue. Next we have Zarafuku. Hades indicated to the one who hugged him. Following him we have Shiva. He said, his hand moving to the purple, four-armed man who gave a lazy grin and wave. How's it going? He asked. That brings us to Hajuan and Beelzebub. Hades spoke again as the tallest of the group just grunted his acknowledgement while the man dressed in all black gave a hum. Now a name you might recognize, Susanoo. The straw hat man gave a tip of the hat and small smile thought that still didn't ring any bells for Izuku. Next is our hound-headed companion Anubis. Anubis growled at Hades for the introduction but gave Izuku a nod while he was at it. Finally we have Lord Odin and his sons Thor and Loki. Hades finished the introductions as Loki zoomed through the air and cackled. Oh, thank goodness you're finally here. The real fun can start now. The god of deceit howled in laughter. Thor meanwhile was staring Izuku down as if evaluating his worth. Odin just looked away in disgust. Well, that certainly took long enough. The old man muttered as he started smoking his cigar. Now how about we introduce ourselves? He suggested with a wide grin, name's Leondia's king, king of Sparta. And don't you worry, we won't let those pain in the butt gods F with ya. Leonidas promised with a smirk only for the man wearing only a leaf to throw an apple at the back of his head. Don't swear in front of a child, Leonidas. He scolded like a father would scold a child. He then slowly approached Izuku with a kind smile. Hey there Izuku, I know this is pretty scary and confusing but I promise none of us are going to hurt you. He said, and for some reason Izuku couldn't explain he immediately trusted this man. Oh thank you, he trailed off having not gotten the man name. The blonde man just smiled in return. Just call me Adam. He suggested before gesturing to the rest of the men he was standing with. As for the rest of us. There's Lubu, Kojiro Sasaki and Jack. He said as the Chinese general was examining Izuku just as Thor was. While Kojiro grinned. It's nice to meet you, young one. Jack smiled and took off his head while dipping his head. A wondrous meeting this is. After them we have Raiden Tamiman, Buddha and Qin Shi Huang. The largest of the humans rushed up to Izuku. Yo little guy. You ready to have some fun? He shouted, jumping in the air, getting a scream from Izuku only for Qin to grab him and send him hurtling through the air and crashing into the ground a little ways away. How? Sorry about him, but he tends to get carried away when he gets excited. The Chinese emperor apologized to the young boy. Yeah, old musclehead goes from 1 to 100 in the blink of an eye. Buddha laughed as he sked on a lollipop. Ah, It's okay. Izuku said, a little unsure while trying to calm himself down. Seeing the boy finally calmed down, Adam continued. Continuing on, we have Nikola Tesla, Grigory Rasputin and Soji Kintoki. Grigory clasped his hands behind his back. A pleasure, little one. A small amused smile on his lips. Soji, however, was giggling uncontrollably. I hope you're ready for what we have in store for you. He warned, not helping in the slightest for Izuku's nerves. Tesla, however, was circling Izuku as he examined every inch of him. I see you still have that annoying habit of yours. Beelzebub muttered under his breath as the scientist straightened. Marvelous. What a wonderful blank canvas to work with. He gushed, and Izuku couldn't tell if that was a good thing or not. After them we have Michael Nostradamus, Simo Haiha and Sakata Kintoki. Simo merely gave a nod while Sakata gave a lazy wave. Michael, however, raced up to Izuku before taking both his hands and shaking them vigorously. Oh, thank goodness you're finally here. Now the world has a chance to be dash. He was cut off as Rasputin grabbed him by the scruff of his neck. I think that's enough out of you. No need to overwhelm the boy more than we already are. He said as he dragged the shorter man away, who waved merrily. Adam released a fond sigh as he watched this before finishing the introduction. And finally we have Siegfried. He said as the man who was swaying on his feet but managed to give a small smile and wave. And finally we have myself and my sisters. The dark-haired woman spoke as she gestured to the group of women behind her. I am Brunhild. And these are my sisters. Hrist, Thrud, Rangriz, Gyrolo, Mist, Rainleaf, Skogul, Gondel, Alvitr, Hlock, Hildr and Gal. She introduced with each of the sisters giving their own greeting in their own way. Hades seeing everyone having been introduced nodded. Now then we can get to business. Now then Izuku, can you guess where we are? The eldest brother asked with Izuku looking around helplessly. A stadium. He eventually said, getting some amused smirks and chuckles. Well, you're not wrong exactly, my boy. Zeus chortled. But to be more precise, we're in your mind. The old man informed. Izuku blinked one and then twice. My mind. He repeated, more than a little doubt entering his voice. Hard to believe, I know, but it is true. Brunhild confirmed before looking around. Though admittedly we did remodel a little. She confirmed with Izuku looking at the large group assembled. Not a single one of them were showing any signs that this was a trick, not that Izuku would know what any of those signs were. Hades let out a smile and small chuckle. Now isn't that a story? From there the craziest story Izuku ever heard or ever will hear was told to him. How half the group were gods, beings of immense power and strength, and were responsible for creating the human race in another dimension. How they grew tired of humanity and wanted to wipe them out, only for Brunhild to step in at the last minute and propose the Ragnarok, a contest between gods and man to determine the fate of the human race. From there the group took turns going over what happened in each match, how both sides experienced wins and losses, and their souls were supposedly sent to Nibelheim. It was neck and neck up until the 9th match, which was Leonidas versus Apollo. And it was during this match that a massive turn took place. Brunhild interrupted, a massive smirk on her face. Because this match and the next two resulted in humanity's victory. The eldest of the Valkyries exclaimed. Leonidas versus Apollo, Rasputin versus Anubis, Kentoki versus Susanoo. All ending in humanity's victory. Brunhild laughed uproariously, causing many of the more arrogant gods to scowl in annoyance and anger. Yeah, but then old Cyclops showed how much of a sore loser he was. Nostradamus laughed as he peered at Odin, who was scowling. What he means to say is that Odin launched a rebellion to take over the heavens. Shiva explained. There were fights, deaths, surprises all around, and the results were the all of us dying and being sent to Nibelheim. The Hindu god explained before scratching the back of his head. Or so we thought. One moment we were all experiencing complete darkness, and the next we were here in a white void. Watching through a screen as an infant opened his eyes for the first time. Jack explained, and Izuku could piece together the rest. So all the voices I've been hearing. That's been you. He proclaimed, getting nods. We had meant to stay silent until your quirk officially awakened, but some of us couldn't help themselves. Hermes explained, as with a quick glance towards Zeus, Michael, and Soji, who laughed unapologetically. My quirk. You know what it is? He asked excitedly, the situation briefly leaving his mind at the thought of finally awakening his quirk. Hermes just smiled amusedly. Why, yes, I believe we have an idea. The messenger god answered rather vaguely. Young Izuku. The 7th Valkyrie sister Rainleaf spoke up for the first time. The answer, we have come to believe that we in essence are your quirk. The Valkyrie explained while adjusting her glasses, leaving Izuku confused. But how can you be my quirk, he asked. All our knowledge is here, as our weapons and abilities. Apollo explained as light emitted from his torso. And we found that you have the same magic we do. Just locked away. The sun god explained, getting a nod. So how exactly do I unlock this magic? Izuku asked excitedly. You don't need to worry, that's already begun. That's actually how Lord Zeus brought you here. Hermes continued his explanation. And now that you have it, we can start your training. Leonidas grinned in antiquation at training a young soldier again. Training? Izuku asked, a smile filling his face. Yup. If we're right, you should have access to our powers and moves, gotta teach you how to use them. No matter how reluctant some of us are. Shiva explained while sparing a glance at Poseidon and Odin as he muttered that last part. So I can become as strong as some of you guys. Izuku wondered, completely motivated. Everyone was so detailed in their descriptions in their fights, and Izuku would love it if he could do something even remotely as cool. Indeed, as your body and magic grows, you'll be able to do more and more. I'd reckon you can perform Lord Zeus's more complicated techniques by the time you're 18 or so. Beelzebub estimated. Don't get too excited either, kid. This training is going to be nothing short of hell. And I hope you're prepared for it. Leonidas warned. Of course. I want to be a hero more than anything. And I'll do anything it takes to do it. Izuku promised. How? Spoken like a true king. Chin laughed. Well, we can skip a few steps at least. Thanks to that Superman syndrome of yours, your muscles are far more developed than they should be. Lucky break, huh? Shiva asked with a grin as Izuku blinked. You mean you guys didn't cause it? He asked, getting a shake of the head from almost everyone. As much sense as that would make, the truth is that you just got lucky to be born with such a strong body. Loki gave a shrug as if he couldn't be bothered to give it any more thought. Izuku's form started to flicker. What's happening? He asked, panicking a little. You're just waking up, don't worry. Tesla was quick too, but any fears Izuku had to rest. We will talk more later, but for now go take care of your family, bud. Buddha instructed, getting a nod from Izuku, who fully disappeared, leaving the large group alone. Well, that went better than I expected, Soji admitted before glancing toward some of the more difficult members of the group. Though I guess it helps he wasn't aware of some of your reputations. He muttered with a smirk. Oh, I have no doubt that young Izuku will be searching for any information he can find in the near future. No doubt discovering who we are and what we were capable of. Jack predicted, getting a raised eyebrow from Sakata. You don't seem too worried about the kid refusing to learn from you. Sakata noticed as Jack hummed while noticing many of the others leaving the arena. What can I say? I don't get the impression that Izuku is the type to reject the knowledge based solely on who I am, but we'll just have to wait and see. Jack said with a turn as he left, as well, leaving Sakata alone before leaving to prepare as well. They had a lot of work to do. Line break. Izuku awoke with a groan escaping his lips as he did so. A second later, two forces slammed into, which were none other than his mother and sister. Turns out he was in the hospital and had been unconscious for 3 days. Something that, while surprising, didn't have the same effect it would have been for he meet his tenants. The doctors have been running tests non-stop. Inko informed as she wiped more tears from her eyes. They say it was due to your quirk activating. She continued to bawl. Honestly, what the doctors had found had left her in disbelief. Quirks were supposed to offer one power, one. And yet Izuku has multiple. True, some of them resemble each other greatly, but the sheer variety was staggering. Izumi, on the other hand, was ecstatic for her brother. Both had dreams of wanting to be heroes, and this was his first step to achieving my dream. And my first step will be here soon. She thought with a mental cheer. She, like Izuku, had been tested for her quirk, and while her brother obviously came first due to the circumstances that brought them here, her test results would be there any moment. As if summoned, their doctor, a young man with black hair, entered the room. I see you're finally awake, Midoriya. Any problems you can feel? Any pain? He asked, with Izuku shaking his head. Just a little stiff and hungry. He admitted, getting an amused smile from the doctor. Well, laying stiff for 3 days will do that to you. He asked, going over the boy's chart. But if these are correct, then there's no reason to keep you here. We just need your mother to sigh you out. The doctor instructed, handing the clipboard to Inko, who wasted no time filling it out. What about me? This was asked by Izumi. What did my test say about my quirk? The 4-year-old girl asked excitedly, only to be scolded by her mother for making too much noise in a hospital. This caused both of them to miss the frown that came to the doctor's face. Though Izuku managed to catch it, and it made him nervous. Ms. Midoriya, you are aware of how we search for and determine quirk genes, correct? He asked, getting a shake of the head from Inko. Quirks, while unique for the most part, share common traits between. Fire quirks will share certain genes with other fire users. Strength enhancers share traits with other enhancers, and so on and so on. The doctor explained before sighing and looking towards Izumi. We found no such traits in your daughter. With that one sentence the world seemed to freeze for Izumi as Inko got to her feet. But doctor. There has to be some kind of mistake. Maybe it's some kind of gene that hasn't been recorded before. Inko tried to argue, getting a sigh from the doctor. We considered that, ma'am, and there is a note truth. Your son even has some unknown traits. Your daughter on the other has no genetic traits that point to signs of a quirk. Inko dropped back into her seat with a vague look on her face as Izuku went to hug his still frozen sister. The doctor sighed as a look of slight pity entered his eyes. I'm not saying it's completely impossible. But according to our research we can only conclude one thing. He informed before muttering the words that would change Izumi's destiny forever. Izumi Midoriya is quirkiness. Line break. The Midoriya household was silent, as it had been since the family of three had gotten home. Izuku went straight to his room, not knowing what to say or do for his sister. The joy he had gotten from learning about his quirk was gone as worry for Izumi filled his thoughts. None of the spritz in his head having said anything. Finally, after a few hours, there was a knock on his door and it opened to reveal Inko. Izuku, I made some dinner. She informed, getting a nod Izuku as he jumped off his bed and followed his mother. She then stopped in a small office room where Izumi had been since they got home. Izumi. She called, opening the door to show Izumi sitting there watching videos of heroes on the computer. They're all so cool. She spoke before turning around, a quivering smile and tears streaming down her face. Can I be like them? Can I be a hero without a quirk? She asked the question that had been plaguing her thoughts since she got her diagnosis. Inko was on the verge breaking down. How could she possibly tell her daughter that her dream was impossible? But what kind of mother would she be if let her daughter follow a dream that was impossible only to be crushed later in life? The two sides of her were fighting on what to do. Support her daughter or try and spare her the heartbreak that is sure to come later in life. Of course you can. The shout came from Izuku without a shred of hesitation or doubt as he ran and gave her a hug. It doesn't matter if the whole world says no. I know you can do it. Right, Mom? He asked, turning to Inko, who froze up for a single second before darted forward and embraced the two in a hug. Of course you can, Izumi. I believe in you. She cried as the two Midoriya women broke into tears with Izuku laughing happily in the embrace. From within Izuku's mindscape, Brunhild and Siegfried were watching, smiles. This kid's gonna be big. The Dragon Slayer stated, getting a nod from his girlfriend. Indeed, now we just need to help get him there. She agreed with a smirk as she continued to watch. I can't wait to get started. Training starts. It was the morning after both Izuku's and Izumi, and the day was already looking to be a beauty as the three residents of the Midoriya household slept soundly in their beds. Get your butt up. The shout from the Spartan King shot Izuku awake and to jump out of his bed and crash into the floor with a loud thud. Why? The 4-year-old whined. You want to sleep in? Well, get your butt strong enough so you can afford to. The Spartan King grunted. Right now you need to focus on your training, which begins now. The king ordered, getting a groan from Izuku just as Inko rushed in with a spatula in hand. Izuku, are you alright? She asked, having heard a loud noise from the kitchen where she was waking Bleakest. I'm fine. Izuku shouted a little too quickly as he scrambled to his feet. Smooth kid, real smooth. Shiva muttered with a roll of his eyes. Izuku blushed scarlet at this as he quickly ran out of the room and followed his mother before taking his place at their table. Izumi wasn't there, but that was no surprise. She always was a late sleeper. So what do you plan to do today, Izuku? After being unconscious for 3 days, Inko wanted her son to take it easy and rest up before she sent him back to school. Izuku for his part was unsure on how to answer that question without worrying her mother. That's impossible, I'm afraid. She's a worrier by nature, and given what's just happened I fear it will only make her more cautious and wary when you and your sister are involved. I would recommend simply saying you plan to start exercising today, though I would recommend you promise to take it easy for now. Hermes recommended to his host. Actually Mom, I thought about exercising today. You know, go to the park where there's plenty of open space to run around and do it safely. Izuku threw out, and instantly Inko's face became one of worry. Oh Izuku, are you sure? I mean, you just got out of the hospital, don't you want to take it easy? She asked despite knowing. The doctor had given the boy a clean bill of health. She didn't want him to overexert himself. I'm sure Mom, I was planning to do this before the accident happened, and now I have even more reason to do it. Izuku said, wanting to get stronger both so he can learn from the vestiges but also so he can protect Izumi. Inko had no way of knowing about the vestiges but could guess about Izumi. It also didn't hurt that she could see the park from their apartment. You promise you'll stay in the park? She asked after a moment of silence. Izuku nodded instantly and quickly. Of course Mom. I'll be careful. I'll stay in the park and won't push myself too hard, I promise. Izuku swore to his mother, who after another moment nodded. Finish your breakfast and get washed up. You can go after that, but I expect you back before it gets dark, understand? She instructed her son. Of course, thank you so much. Izuku said as he ate his breakfast and quickly went back to his room to get changed. A few minutes later Izuku had arrived at the park in shorts and a t-shirt. Let's get warmed up. 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and then a 10 kilometers run. That's about 50 laps around the park. Simo instructed, and Izuku could only laugh a bit in disbelief. Isn't that going a bit overboard? Izuku couldn't help but ask, getting a laugh from Nostradamus. Oh, don't you worry, little green. With your little condition your body should be able to handle it, and if it can't we can just put you back together later. The French seer cackled, getting groans from the rest of the vestiges. The lunatic's annoyance aside. He's correct when he says you don't have to worry about overdoing your body. Even though it's minimal at the moment, the magic running through your body will be able to heal any lasting injuries you would attain, Rasputin explained, getting a nod from Izuku. Would you get on with it? You're wasting everyone's time. Lubu growled, sick of all the talking, getting an eep from Izuku. Yes sir. Sorry sir. He answered quickly as he quick started on his push-ups. It was a bit of a slow going at first, as the vestiges had to correct his posture, and it was only when he was able to hold it for a good 5 minutes that he allowed to start doing his push-ups. It was surprisingly easy, thanks to his Superman syndrome. His muscles were strong enough that he was able to get through them, as well as the sit-ups, with relative ease. The squats are where Izuku was starting to feel the pain slightly, but managed to get through them easy enough. Alright, now for the laps. 50 of them. Sakata reminded them, getting a groan from Izuku, but he nodded as he made his way to the curb and started to do his run. Izuku started off well. It was early in the morning, so it wasn't too hot yet, so Izuku was able to get through the first 10 laps with relative ease. The vestiges also told him to stop for water about every 6 or 7 laps, as they didn't need him overheating and dehydrating. Laps 11 through 20 is when Izuku really started to sweat. It was during lap 28 when Izuku hurled up his breakfast in a bush. And if he wasn't mistaken, he thought he heard Loki grumbling something about not thinking he could last that long to an amused-sounding Hermes. Izuku used laps 29 through 35 to recover and get his stride back. During 36 through 40 Izuku was able to catch his second win and complete the 50 laps. Well, I gotta say that didn't completely SCK. Sakata muttered as Izuku dropped down to the ground, dripping in sweat and breathing heavy after gulping down water from the fountain. Oh, don't be so HRD on the boy, he performed admirably. Jack defended his host. Indeed, it might have been unsightly to watch, but his determination was appealing. Apollo commented. Izuku, focus on the light and warmth from the sun on your skin as your magic runs through you. The sun god instructed and Izuku did as instructed. It was tricky at first considering Izuku's never done it, but he did as Apollo instructed and focused on the sun beaming down on. It was hardly noticeable at first, but Izuku could feel a change. A release. His muscles were loosening up as the ache was dulling and his energy and stamina were returning. Wow! Izuku muttered as he got feeling refreshed. This is amazing. Thanks, Mr. Apollo. Izuku getting a chuckle from Apollo. Think nothing of it, child. It's to be expected of one as glorious as am I, Apollo exclaimed, getting growls and groans from some of the others. Moving on, it's time to move on to the actual training. Sakata instructed. Now head into the forest. You don't have to go far, just so no one disturbs us. The former retainer ordered, getting a nod from the boy as he marched a little way into the small wooded area. This should be far enough, now take off your shoes and socks. Kintoki told him, getting a nod from the boy as he did as he was told. Now what? He asked, only to scream in fear as the man himself appeared in front of him. So it is possible to materialize, even like this. He muttered before looking towards Izuku, who looked both scared and confused and couldn't help but smirk a little. Shocked are ya? He asked with the boy nodding. How are you dash? He was caught off as Kintoki raised his hand. I'm not. I was able to materialize as a projection, but that's about it. Kintoki explained before facing the tree. But that's not important right now. Sakata turned to the tree. It's time to begin your lesson in earnest. The former retainer informed, and Izuku's eyes began to sparkle. What is it? What am I going to learn? He questioned, with Sakata adopting a horse stance. The most basic of basics. Sakata informed before making his move. The Seiken, a karate practitioner's straight punch, shot from waist and uses the first two knuckles on the hand. Sakata explained to a star-struck Izuku. Incredibly simple, and yet. Here Sakata threw another one. Crack, incredibly dangerous. Sakata finished his explanation as before Izuku's eyes a second, illusionary version of the tree toppled and shattered into pieces as it faded away, leaving the real standing tall. That's what would have happened. If that punch was real, the tree would have been destroyed. Izuku marveled at the show of strength. Now then, get into horse stance. You'll be throwing 100 seikens on each fist while maintaining the horse stance the entire time. That way your entire body will be getting stronger. Sakata informed as the boy who nodded and tried to copy the stance. Like this? He questioned as Salada looked over the stance. Widen your legs, and straighten your back. He corrected, getting a nod from Izuku as he made the changes. Giving it another look, Sakata nodded. Good. Now 100 seikens with your left hand and then 100 seikens with your right. The man repeated himself as after taking a deep breath through a punch. Thud, Izuku yelped. Even with his Superman syndrome, Izuku still felt a sharp sting in his knuckles. Not bad. Now again you have 99 more with your left. He reminded the teen, who after a moment retook the horse stance and threw another punch. Thud, Izuku once again winced and glanced towards his fist, which was already starting to bruise, before glancing over at Kintoki, who had his arms crossed and an eyebrow raised. Come on Izuku, focus. You want to be strong just like All Might. So you can help and save everyone. He thought, determination filling him as he punched the tree again. Thud, the stinging was back, but Izuku ignored it. Thud, more and more bruises were forming on Izuku's hand, which started to bleed slightly. Thud, thud. Sakata watched as the boy continued on with his punching, wincing ever so slightly at each hit, but soldiered on to continue his training. The man nodded, seeing this, satisfied. Time to shake things up bit. He thought. Izuku. He called, causing Izuku to turn to him just in time to see a fist slam into his face. Pain erupted from his nose as he flew through the air. And fell to the ground with a groan. What was that for, sensei? He asked with tears streaming down his face as he clutched his bleed nose only to see Kintoki looking at his fist and then at Izuku in confusion. How did I, he thought, his mind whirling with possibilities. What he intended to do was throw a punch and have it pass through Izuku, who would predictably scream and fall on his butt. This was meant to both teach Izuku to keep his guard up while staying focused on the task at hand. But this, Kintoki thought as a grin formed on his face, one he knew the others were slowly growing. This changes things, opens up possibilities. He thought. Sensei. Kintoki was snapped out of his thoughts when he saw Izuku approach him. Ah, my bad, Izuku. I didn't know that would actually hit you. The man admitted. Though it has changed a few things in your future training menu. He told the boy who didn't know if that was a good thing or not. Oh, okay, sensei. Izuku muttered before touching his nose. But what do I do about this? He asked, knowing his mother would lose it if she saw his broken nose and hand. Kintoki just waved it off. Just do what you did earlier with the sun. It should heal it up, no problem. However, do not heal your left hand, not yet anyway. Kintoki ordered, getting a nod from Izuku, who found a clearing and let the sun wash over him, while keeping his left hand in the shadows. Relief instantly washed over his face as he felt nose gently snap back into place as it healed itself as he let out a content sigh. Good, now back to work. You have 90 lefts right and your entirety of your rights left to throw. Kintoki told the boy, who nodded, but he still had one question. So when will I be able to heal my hand and fingers? He asked, expecting an answer such as when you're done or when I say so, but even then he was caught off guard by the answer. When they break. Kintoki answered without hesitation. We need to toughen up your muscles and bones, and while your strength, resistance, and healing factor will increase as you grow, we don't have time to wait. So we'll be going for broke. Once a bone is broken, you'll simply heal it with the only healing factor that's available at the moment. This way we ensure that we can advance at a rapid rate while not destroying your body in the process. Understand? The man asked towards Izuku, who nodded, having followed the best he could. Right, then get to it. Sakata informed, getting a nod from Izuku, who stood back in front of the tree, adopted the horse stance and started punching again. It was grueling work and incredibly tiring. Kintoki, after examining the finger, nodded and let Midoriya heal it. The next break came on the 27 punch, and then 35 the 41, and finally all 5 fingers had broken as of the 59 punch. It wasn't just Izuku's fist that was under constant strain, his legs, remaining in constant horse stance, had a pool of sweat surrounding him. By the 100th punch, each of the fingers on his left hand had broken and healed at least 3 times, and his legs were shaking. Mercifully, Kintoki allowed Izuku to get water before he did the other set, which Izuku was more than a little grateful towards. The next set was even harder than the first. Not only was his right hand just as bruised and broken as his left, but his legs were also constantly giving out now, forcing Izuku to redo the ones he buckled on several times now. Mercifully, it finally ended late into the afternoon and Izuku entered his apartment. Instantly Inko was on him, scanning him for injury of any kind, and while her son was covered in grime and sweat but no visibly injuries. Inko wanted to fret over son and try and get him to take it easy, but considering that there didn't seem to be anything wrong with him, she couldn't really say anything. Well, just go wash up for dinner, she ordered, getting a nod from Izuku. As Izuku headed for the bathroom, he passed by the office where Izumi sat. She's been there all day, Inko said, having followed Izuku. She's doing all the research she can, Inko said, her tone filled with worry and pride. She really took to being a hero without a quirk to heart, she told her son as both watched the girl type away before the mother departed to begin working on dinner. As for Izuku, he smiled as he headed for the bathroom, happy that his sister wouldn't give up on her dream no matter what. Line break. Izuku groaned as he slowly opened his eyes, only to blink in confusion as he found himself surrounded by books. A library, he thought, looking around only to hear a jovial laugh. Welcome, young scholar. The voice shouted as Nicholas Tesla whirled into view, his Valkyrie partner Gondel right behind him. To our collective knowledge. Tesla finished with a laugh as Izuku simply looked on, confused. A sigh soon filled the air. I told you he wouldn't understand. Beelzebub muttered as he approached the group. Midoriya, what you see before you is the collective knowledge of each of the beings sealed inside of you. The god explained as Izuku gasped. Really, it's all here. He wondered, looking around the seemingly infinite-looking library. Indeed, and we are going to stuff every bit of knowledge that's here into that head of yours. Tesla promised, getting Izuku to look around. That might take a while. Izuku muttered. Indeed, luckily we have one advantage going for us. Time can move different here. Days could pass here and it would only be an hour in the real world. Beelzebub revealed. So we can advance your education exponentially while you sleep. Izuku's eyes widened in surprise as this bit of news, just as Tesla snapped his fingers. Now then, let's get started, shall we? He asked, sitting down at the table as Gondel and Beelzebub grabbed more books. Izuku nodded, taking a seat next to Tesla as their first lesson began. Line break. The next day came and went in the same fashion: wake up and eat breakfast, though this time it was far lighter, before getting changed and head to the park to repeat the same workout he had done the previous day, only this time Izuku had to fight through the pains and ache of his muscles from the previous day, which was followed by another study session that night. This led to Izuku groaning as he and Izumi walked towards their kindergarten class. Something wrong, brother? Izumi questioned, having not seen her brother much these last 2 days. Izuku just sighed but shook his head. I'm fine, Izumi. He told her, getting a tilted head from Izumi, but she nodded all the same. A couple of minutes later the two reached the gates of their pre-K, where their teachers were waiting for them. Oh, Izuku and Izumi, it's so good to see you two again. Umi, the female teacher, while Sarutobi kneeled down in front of them. How are you two feeling? He asked, looking over to two. We're fine, Mr. Sarutobi. Izuku promised, getting a nod from the brother. Yeah, couldn't be better. Izumi muttered, only to notice Umi looking towards her with a sad smile. Is something wrong, Ms. Umi? Izumi asked, causing her to blink and shake her head. Oh, it's nothing, Izumi. Just got something in my eye. She told the girl as she wiped her eyes. As the two kids headed in, Sarutobi turned towards Umi. I'm fine, she said before he could open his mouth. I never thought I'd experience something like this. And I don't want Izumi to suffer because of something she can't control. She muttered, causing Sarutobi to sigh. I know, but all we can do is go on like usual, and if something happens, deal with it the best we can. He reminded her. Umi nodded and gave him a grateful smile. Inside the room the class of students had surrounded the two Midoriya siblings. Hey Midoriya, is it true that you got your quirk? One of his friends asked, getting a quick nod from Izuku. Well, can you show us then? A girl asked excitedly, and Izuku was slightly nervous. What should I do? He thought, only to hear a mad giggling. Oh, a chance to show off. I know just the thing. Loki cackled before sending a few images into his mind with instructions. Okay, stand back. He told the kids, who did as he said. Slowly, after a few seconds later, his feet left the ground as the kids gasped in awe. You can fly. A boy exclaimed at the awesome sight. Izuku let himself grin as well. That's not all, he said as a small portal appeared, causing him to stick his hand through, only for it to appear through another portal onto a table close by. The class was in awe, but Katsuki just scoffed. Oh please, that doesn't have anything on my quirk, he boasted as small sparks appeared on his hands. However, unlike before, where they looked at his quirk with shame and jealously, now, while still impressed, didn't have the same sparkle they had previously. This caused him to stew in anger and was about to jump the worthless Deku when one of their useless classmates opened their mouths. What about you, Izumi, what's your quirk? One of her friends asked. Izumi was silent as she looked down in embarrassment before finally answering in a timid voice. I don't have one. She admitted as everyone blinked in confusion. You don't have a quirk? Her friend asked, confusion clear in her eyes as Izumi nodded. You know that weird machine people go through it to help determine their quirk? She asked, getting nods from all around. Well, I went through the machine and it told me I don't have one. Izumi explained, waiting for their reactions. However, came just as predicted. Ha, so you're even more useless than I thought. Bakugo sneered as he approached the green-haired girl while Izuku narrowed his eyes as he laid it on the ground and stood close to Izumi. Weak little Izumi, too worthless to even have a quirk wasted on her. Bakugo continued, his grin becoming more and more menacing as Izumi's fear grew more and more. Even Deku managed to get a worthless quirk, but you managed to miss that up, and do you know why? Bakugo said within striking distance as he raised his hand. Because you're a weak, worthless, little dash. Bam. Crash. Umi and Sarutobi came running at the noise only to see Bakugo on the floor and Izuku comforting his sister who looked to be crying. What happened? Sarutobi demanded while Umi went to check on Bakugo as one of the children explained the best they could. Bakugo was going to hit Izumi and Izuku shoved him to the ground. He explained as Bakugo sat up and snarled. Don't you dare shove me, Deku. He shouted only to recoil in shock and slight fear as Izuku for the first time glared back. Then don't be mean to Izumi. Hearing this, both teachers had a bad feeling grow in the pit of their stomach. Bakugo, why would you attack Izumi? Umi questioned. With Bakugo scoffing. Because she's a freak, she admitted it herself that she didn't have a quirk. I was just trying to put her in her place. Bakugo growled and Izuku snarled with a glare as Sarutobi actually had to hold him back from attacking the ashen blonde. As the two boys glared at each other, Sarutobi and Umi glanced at each other. Both knowing a meeting with the parents needed to happen and dreading the meeting that was bound to happen. Line break. The day had come to an end and almost all families had picked up their children, leaving only the Midoriyas and Bakugas. Thank you for meeting with us. Umi said as Masaru and Mitsuki Bakugo along with Inko sat with their children at one of the tables in the classroom. No problem, ma'am, but was there a particular reason you needed to meet with us? Masaru asked nervously, seeing and his son and Izuku were glaring at each other. Sarutobi just sighed. I think it would be best if we just showed you, he said before showing the security footage. The adults were silent as the scene played out, watching as Izuku and Izumi entered the room, how the class surrounded the two before Izuku showed off his quirk and Bakugo's snide comment towards it. However, it was when Izumi revealed that she was quirkiness when things got ugly. The parents watched in horror as Bakugo belittled and insulted Izumi as he menacingly approached her and raised his hand, and it was clear to everyone what the ashen blonde was about to do. Bam! Crash! Only for Izuku to shove him roughly to the floor as the two glared at each other. It was, however, the true trouble came at the end when they heard the final words come out of Bakugo's mouth. Because she's a freak, she admitted it herself that she didn't have a quirk. I was just trying to put her in her place. With that, the video ended, leaving the room in complete silence and the two boys glaring even harder at each other. The silence, however, didn't last long as Mitsuki instantly turned to Bakugo, her eyes burning with rage. What the hell is wrong with you? Mitsuki roared, never having been this angry before. Who taught you that quirkist bullshit, because I know you didn't get it from us. Mitsuki demanded with Katsuki tsuking. No one taught me anything. I was only using common sense. Bakugo huffed before pointing at Izumi, who flinched. She was a freak and it's my job as the future #1 hero to put that freak in her place, and any some who defends her while I'm at it. Only for Mitsuki to instantly force his mouth shut. I'm going to wash your mouth out with so much soup you'll be burping bubbles for weeks. She hissed before whirling around to start and try and do even the most basic of damage control, but one glance and she could already tell the damage was done. Izumi was shaking horribly as her mother held her tight, whispering reassurances into her ears while Izuku looked like he was seconds away from attacking. Omi saw this and continued in a hurry. As you just saw and can see, I don't think it would be wise for your children to be separated. Omi said, taking a quick glance towards Inko as she pulled out some documents. This situation was bad enough already, but it didn't help that Izuku Midoriya was also a lawyer that was quickly growing in prestige and fame. So I gathered some information and phablets about other pre-K around the area. Omi said as she extended them for the parents to take, only for Mitsuki to hold her hand to stop her. That won't be necessary. I think it would be best if I withdrew Katsuki and homeschooled him for a while. The mother announced, getting looks of surprise from the teachers and Inko, while Masaru nodded his head in agreement. What? Why do I have to leave when it was Deku who attacked me when I was just trying to show that useless freak her place? Katsuki, only for Mitsuki to grab him by the head. Because it's clear for all of us to see that Masaru and I failed as parents when we didn't teach you how to act like the most basic of decent human being. She hissed before turning around and giving a low bow to the Midoriya family. I can't even begin to apologize enough for what Katsuki said and how he acted. The varied woman bowed to her oldest friends and how were basically her niece and nephew. Inko was silent for several seconds before she let out a sigh. Mitsuki, I'm not even going to say it's fine because it isn't any shape or form. What your son said was completely unacceptable, and a part of me wishes Izuku had done more than simply push your son down. Inko admitted, and Mitsuki nodded, knowing that if it had been her sibling that had been treated like that, she wouldn't have been satisfied until she broke something on the bully who did it. But I can tell you're remorseful of what happened, even when it's clear your son isn't. Inko said, her eyes narrowing down on Katsuki, who merely crossed his arms and looked away with a TSK. So if you say you'll take Katsuki out of this school and work on his behavior, I'm willing to look past in the name of our friendship. Inko offered, and Mitsuki immediately rocketed towards her for a hug. You're the best, Anko. The ashen-haired mother shouted. And I promise Katsuki will be a new kid by the time he goes back to school. Mitsuki swore before she turned and bowed to the teachers, with Masaru getting up and bowing too. I apologize immensely for the unacceptable way my son acted, and I'll be withdrawing him immediately. Mitsuki sounding far more serious, with Omi nodding. We'll discuss the details later. She agreed as two straightened up, grabbed their son, who begun to fight against his mother's iron-like grip. I'll talk to you soon, Inko. Mitsuki said, not sure what to say before the three left, Katsuki screaming all the way. The door barely snapped shut when Izuku heard a snort. What a piece of SHT, Lubu snorted, getting a grunt of agreement from Thor. He attacked the sibling he knew couldn't defend themselves instead of the one who could, pathetic. The Norse good sneered. At least he's gone, now we don't have to worry about him anymore. Gull muttered, trying to sound optimistic with throat humming. Gone for now at least. The strongest Valkyrie grunted. Omi and Sarutobi meanwhile were now speaking. We are so sorry this happened, Ms. Midoriya. We were outside getting the other children and didn't think something like this would escalate, or at least not this quickly. Omi told the mother. We weren't planning on saying anything to the kids until Izumi was ready. And then help her explain to the class what was happening. We thought we could help show them she was still Izumi even without a quirk. The male teacher explained with regret the young child had to go through this horrible experience. Inko simply nodded. I understand, only 20% of the population of the world are quirkiness. I can't imagine you were ever told what to do in the event one of the children were found quirkiness. Inko said, knowing that the teachers in front of her probably never thought they'd have to explain the concept of someone being quirkless. This got grateful nods from the two teachers before the mother turned to her daughter. Still though, I'm worried. We saw Katsuki's reaction to my daughter's status but not anyone else's. I don't mean to call into question your ability, but the safety of my children do come first. She told the teachers. Omi was about to reassure the mother that her daughter was safe. Already the two had discussed what they would do. From having at least one of them in the classroom at all times when the students were there to finding videos and books that can explain to young children why Izumi is just the same as always. However, despite all of that, Sarutobi seemed to have a hidden card up his sleeve. Of course, ma'am, we've already put thought into what to happen and are ready to be put into place. However, if safety is your concern, perhaps I can offer a suggestion. Sarutobi said, getting curious looks from the children and Umi and a cautious one from Inko. Tell me, have you ever heard of the all-purpose Tokugawa gyms? Sarutobi, as the woman tilted her head in confusion. The name does ring a bell, but I can't say I know anything more. Inko admitted, with Sarutobi smiling. To put it simply, it's a gym that offers all kinds of lessons from general fitness, yoga, swimming, as well as quirk training and martial arts. He explained. They're all classes for all ages and levels as expertise. He explained as he reached into the desk and pulled out a pamphlet. Take a look for yourself. He offered as he handed the woman the pamphlet for her to look over. Inko had to admit it did look very impressive. People of all ages, backgrounds and quirk types. As well as all kinds of programs they offered. The more Inko read, the more she was impressed. However, what caught her eyes were the prices of the different plans. They're so cheap. Inko thought, shocked. Even with her growing career as a lawyer, she was a little iffy on money. However, these prices were cheap and affordable. Enough so that it made her a little suspicious. Cheap, right? He asked, as if knowing what she was thinking. Mitsunari Tokugawa despite has a deep love and appreciation for both quirks and martial arts, despite having a weak body and no quirk of his own. These gyms are a passion project for him, and in the interest of helping people advance their mind and bodies has set the price anyone could afford to use them. Sarutobi said as Inko took another glance at the pamphlet. Thank you for this. She said as she put it in her purse. Now about Izuku. She began, only for Umi to interrupt with a smile. Izuku hasn't had any problems before now, and it was to defend his sister. Now that the cause of the problems has been removed and he knows will prevent any further incidents from happening, he shouldn't have to do anything else, right, Izuku? She asked the green-haired boy, who only nodded, though he knew if he'd needed to he'd step in an instant. Both sides nodded satisfied as the green-haired family left, with both the Midoriyas and teachers feeling hopeful for the future. Line break. Turns out Mitsuki was as good as her word, and Katsuki had been removed from their pre-K class. The class was a little confused as to why the explosive blonde was gone, but it's not the first time a student suddenly left, so they didn't think too much about it. Umi and Sarutobi also kept their promises as well and sat the class down to explain what it meant to be quirkless and why Izumi shouldn't be treated any differently. Most of the class understood this, and considering how nice Izumi was, didn't treat her any differently. There were a few kids who thought along the lines of Katsuki, but one look from their teachers stopped them from doing anything. It had been a week since then the family had decided to visit the all-purpose gym after doing more research online. The building was even more amazing up close. A towering cylinder-shaped building with multiple firing ranges in barren wastelands to help test out quirks behind it. Inko was reminding her children for the umpteenth time they had to be on their best behavior as they entered the building and approached the receptionist desk, who greeted them with a smile. Good morning and welcome to the Tokugawa All-Purpose Gym. How can I help you today? She asked. I was hoping to sign up for the all-purpose family plan. Inko told her, who nodded with a smile. One of our most popular options. The receptionist smiled as she handed Inko the form to fill out. After completing all the paperwork, Inko handed it back to the receptionist, who gave them a large list of activities to choose from. Please take your time in making your selection. She smiled before she left to help another guest. As the green-haired family looked over the form and classes. An impressive roster, though many of these we will teaching you ourselves. Hades remarked as he materialized in his astral form, which only Izuku could see, and scanned the list. Boxing is definitely not needed, I'll be taking care of that. Apollo smirked at the mere thought of Izuku learning boxing from anyone aside from the very god of invented it. I myself am quite skilled with Baritsu, no need to study that here. Jack added in helpfully. It might not happen for a while, but we swordsmen can teach you what you need to know about the way of the blade. Kojiro promised. As are firearms and warfare tactics. Simo muttered as Leonidas grunted in agreement. Sumo and wrestling are handled naturally. Raiden spoke with a grin, so is karate. Sakata reaffirmed. Chin however studied the list. Perhaps you should go for one of the Chinese martial arts. Chin said as he materialized and pointed to Lingshu Chin Na. It's an ancient style I faced when I was alive. Chin explained. It revolves around hitting pressure points to take down your opponents. Yeah, that's all well and good, but we should look into something that could enhance his striking type fighting styles. Perhaps Muay Thai, it's a powerful striking style on par with boxing. Apollo threw in his 2 cents. Judo could also work. Raiden muttered. I never learned it myself, but learning to throw your opponents could work wonders for taking them down. All great options, but how do I pick? Izuku thought, trying to pick. Go for all of them, kid. If you can't pick one, just pick them all. Leonidas encouraged with Izuku grimacing. But my training with all of you could suffer. Izuku pointed out, getting a scoff. As if we'd let that happen. Shiva rolled his eyes. Trust of us, kid, we wouldn't be suggesting this if we didn't know our plan would work. The Hindu god explained, getting an unsure nod from Izuku. Mom, I think I want to do judo, Muay Thai, and Lingshu Chin Na. Izuku requested, getting an unsure look from Inko. Are you sure, Izuku? It seems like a lot for a 4-year-old. She didn't want her son to get in over his head. Yeah, Mom, I'm sure. He promised, causing Inko to sigh but nod before turning her attention to Izumi, who was pulling her sleeve. I'd like jujitsu and judo, please. She requested, getting another sigh from the mother. After filling in the request for her children as well as one for aerobics and yoga for herself, they went back to the receptionist, who looked over their choices. You two certainly are eager. She laughed, getting a sigh from Inko. A little too eager sometimes, actually. The mother muttered, getting another laugh from the woman. Well, that pretty much finishes things up here. Remember, you can drop a program at any time and the quirk course is open at all times, for the little heroes in training. She gave a wink, causing the family to chuckle nervously. However, just as the woman was about to give them directions to the judo studio which had the next beginner's class, she noticed a figure coming towards them and gasped happily. Oh, perfect timing. Mr. Hoppachi over here. She called out, getting his attention and causing the man to walk over. The family was imitated by the man while the vestiges were sizing the man up until the man finally spoke. Appa. What can Apachai do for you today? The now named Apachai questioned with a happy grin and raised arm. The family was thrown off by the sudden change, but the secretary just smiled. Well, Mr. Hoppachi, we have some new members to our little gym here. The young man has even signed up for your Muay Thai class. She explained, and the man's eyes shined with excitement as he picked the boy up. Appa. A new friend for Apachai to play with and train. Don't worry, new little friend, Apachai promises he won't nearly kill you like the students before you. The giant promised, not installing much confidence in the family. Well, I like him. Shiva commented with a grin, getting a bark of laughter. Oh yeah, a Spartan for sure. Leonidas added. Well, before that, these two kids both signed up for judo and I was hoping you could take them to meet the teacher. The receptionist requested, and the giant put Izuku down and gave a salute. You can count on me. Appa. He promised before turning to the family. Follow Apachai and he'll take you to judo class. He shouted before taking off, and the family caught up in the moment, chased after him. Luckily the class wasn't that far and Apachai made sure to keep in sight as he led them to the class. Seeing the family arrive, the man grinned and knocked on the door. Mr. Shibukawa, Apachai is here with new friends for you to teach. He called. New students, you say? An elderly voice asked as footsteps approached the door. Well, all right then. The voice came from the door. Let's get a look at them, he said as the door opened. The man studied the two children as Inko moved out of the way. Interesting, he said, leaning a little closer. You're both here to learn judo? He asked, getting a nod from the two children. May I ask why? He requested, wanting to know why the children would want to start learning martial arts. Izumi looked down as she clutched the hem of her dress. I want to be a hero, but I wasn't born with a quirk, the girl admitted. I know it's strp and dumb to try and be a hero without a quirk, but I don't care. I will be a hero and prove them all wrong, Izumi declared, glaring at Shibukawa as if daring him to say anything against her dream. The old man blinked once and then twice before bursting out laughing uproariously. Clapping his hands together as he nodded, the old man took several seconds before calming down. Well, I certainly wasn't expecting that. If you want to chase such an impossible dream, who am I to deny you? He asked before turning to Izuku. What about, young man, why do you want to study the martial arts? He asked with Izuku stepping forward. Because I want to get stronger. Strong enough to protect my own family against anything and anyone. My quirk is strong and I'm grateful to it, but I want to get even stronger, and I know judo and the martial arts can help me with that, Izuku told the old man, who scratched his chin with an untested grin. Strength for the sake of strength, huh? Not a bad reason at all, he said before straightening up. My name is Guki Shibukawa and I think you two will make fine students. He formally introduced himself, getting grins from the two children. Before we go any further, sir, I think you should know my children have signed up for other classes besides this one, and will have responsibilities outside of this class, Inko said, wanting to inform the Judo MSTR that her children won't be available 24/7. You and just about every human in this building, we teachers have been given a lot of freedom here, but so have the students. They're free to come and go as they wish, Guki said as he turned around. Thank you for bringing them here, Apachai, he said towards the Muay Thai MSTR, who flashed him a thumbs up. No problem, Apachai is going to go now. See you later in class, new friend. The giant waved towards Izuku before darting off. The old man chuckled before resuming his walk into the dojo. Come along now. I want to introduce you to the basics before the class starts, he said as the family followed quickly behind him. Once everything was settled, Izuku and Izumi were sitting on their legs while Inko watched a little distance behind as Guki stood informant of 3 training dummies, with 2 being kid-sized. Now let's begin by a quick rundown of the basics. Judo is all about throwing, immobilizing and forcing your opponents into SBMSN. The old man explained, getting nods from the children, who gave their full attention to their new sensei. Now let me give you a basic example of what that means, Shibukawa offered as he approached the man-sized dummy. Izuku, focus your magic into your eyes. Trust us, it'll make this a lot easier, Adam instructed, getting a nod from the child as he did so. Suddenly he felt a wealth of power open up as his eyes and intensity fell upon his eyes until the intensity died down and Izuku opened his eyes. Izuku was hit with a sense of vertigo as his eyes seemed to take in the details of everything around him, causing him to shut his eyes. Breathe, Izuku, and don't worry, the vertigo will pass. For now focus on Shibukawa, Adam instructed as Izuku slowly opened his eyes and kept them locked on his sensei. Alright, let's start off with something simple. The old man grinned, grabbing the collar and sleeve of the dummy before quickly turning and throwing it over his shoulder, causing it to slam into the ground with a thud, leaving the 2 children in awe. Pretty cool, huh? The old man said before gesturing to the 2 smaller dummies. Why don't you 2 give it a try? He asked as the 2 children who went up to the 2 dummies. Izumi stared at hers for a few seconds before gripping the dummy's sleeve and collar, turned and tried to throw it over her shoulder. The dummy did move and tip slightly, but wasn't able to go beyond that. Ah ha ha, not a bad first attempt, my dear. But your hands were a little off. To get the best placement they should be here and here, he said, gently guiding her hands to the best point on the dummy. Also the pivot needs to be quicker and sharper to give you just that little extra boost. Guki instructed, getting a nod from Izumi, who immediately went to work on making the changes to her form. Seeing this, Guki nodded before turning to Izuku, who gulped but approached the dummy and placed his hands where he was instructed to. And then Izuku threw his dummy over his head and onto the mat below. Everyone stared dumbfounded how the 4-year-old did it perfectly. How did I?" Izuku questioned, only to hear a chuckle coming from Zeus. "I see that divine reflection of yours is still as effective as always." Zeus chuckled with Adam humming. "Eyes," Izuku thought. Yes, divine reflection, the ability to perfectly replicate any move and technique he lays his eyes upon, including the ones used by divine beings, regardless of its speed or power. Brunhild explained before smirking. "And believe me when I say we will be abusing the hell out of it for your training," she confirmed as Izuku went starry-eyed at the thought. "Don't get too excited, kid. You'll doing each technique over and over again until they're engraved in your very bones." Buddha promised, getting a nervous nod from Izuku. Cutting the connection, Izuku turned to the sound of clapping as Guki Shibukawa. "Well done, little Izuku. That was a great first throw," the old man praised before his smile turned challenging. "But can you do it again?" he challenged, causing Izuku to nod before he bent down, grabbed the dummy by the sleeve and collar, and with a mighty throw both picked up the dummy and swung it in a perfect arc over his head. From floor to floor. Guki thought, going wide-eyed at the side, as he watched the boy do it again and again. Grab the dummy, swing it in a perfect arc before slamming it down, only to restart the process a moment later. Bang! Turning, he saw the dummy on the ground, Izumi breathing heavily above it before she picked it up and tired to slam it onto the ground. She was unsuccessful the first time, but after taking a deep breath and with a mighty yank threw it over her shoulder and onto the ground below, a triumphant gleam in her eye as she stood above it. Amazing! Guki thought as he turned to Izuku. One seems to be a genius, he thought as he continued to watch the boy slam the dummy onto the floor. While the other one seems to get a grasp on the technique faster than most and is able to correct herself quickly. Guki thought as he watched his two new students practice with a zeal he rarely sees in his adult students. Slowly a grin formed on his face as an excited gleam appeared in his eyes as his heart beat faster than it had in years. This was going to be fun. Throughout the years. Part 1. Alright, now put your back into it, Leonidas roared to a now 5-year-old Izuku Midoriya as he held a mini javelin in his hand while on one of the practice fields at the all-purpose gym. The boy gripped the spear tight and ran and threw it, causing the javelin to fly through the air until it landed a considerable distance away and a bit further away than the last one he threw. Better, the rebellious king remarked with a slight nod, getting a grin from Izuku. For the past year Izuku had dedicated himself to training, even though it was just covering the basics. Every morning the spurts would have him wake up a bit before the sun rays to get a small workout in before school. They also begin to advise him on a new diet to help his growth even more. Inko was of course puzzled by this, but after doing some research found it pretty beneficial and agreed to it. After school Izuku, Izumi, and Inko, when she wasn't busy, would head to the gym. Izuku continued to use divine reflection just as the spurts ordered and continued to excel not just in judo but also in Muay Thai and also Lingshu Chin Na, taught by a man named Kensei Ma. However, like the spurts warned him, they weren't going to let him just skate by with copying techniques. They had him practice whatever he had learned in class that day until they were sure it was ingrained into him. Izumi, while not as skilled or progressing as quickly, was just as determined to grow stronger and achieve her dream. This led to her being another standout in not just her judo class but also jiu-jitsu, which was taught by a man named Akasane Koetsuji. On his days off Izuku would replicate the training he did when he first started at the park. As he got stronger, that started to change. The warm-up remained the same, but after his run he was sometimes told to kick the tree instead of punching it. This way his legs and feet would grow tougher and more resilient, just as his arms did. Radian and Leonidas also started having him do weight training to further increase his strength by heading to the white room at the gym. The instructors, while a little intense, were eager to help someone so young grow stronger, and it only increased when they heard of his Superman syndrome. It wasn't just physically he grew but mentally as well. Just as Tesla promised every night he would bring Izuku into his mind and would continuous tutor him for what amounted to days at a time, which in the real world were only a few hours. He was often joined by Beelzebub, Regenleaf, and Gondel. This too got the attention of teachers who praised the boy as a genius. Normally this would get a child picked on, but even kids as young as them could tell Izuku was getting bigger and bigger. Very recently, however, Leonidas decided to begin his Spartan training, normally something that would have started at 7, but with his progress and current body strength they all found him at meeting the needed requirements for his body to withstand the brutal training. According to Leonidas, Spartan training included boxing, swimming, wrestling, javelin throwing and discus throwing. Naturally Raiden would be teaching wrestling, though with a few differences between them. Leonidas would be giving additional lessons on the side. Boxing, however, was difficult as both Apollo and Leonidas wanted to teach it. Apollo pointed out that as the god of boxing he was the best choice for the job. Leonidas, however, countered with that most what Izuku would be learning would be about getting in close and exchanging blows, and learning how to weave in out would be counterintuitive to that. The argument continued until an annoyed Brunhild shouted out them to be quiet and suggest they both teach their own styles. Apollo's boxing was a mix of out-boxing who kept their distance while performing long-range punches and reaming light on their feet, and box puncher, which was similar except it could deal harder blows when necessary. Leonidas, however, went with swarmer style, which meant overwhelming their opponent by applying constant pressure, and slugger favors power and brutally over speed and mobility. With clear reluctance but unable to offer any real counter, the two boxers could do nothing but agree. This left swimming, discus throwing and javelin throwing, and while discus throwing and javelin thought were simple enough, swimming was anything but. The gym had many different pools for its members to use, and Izuku was going to take full advantage. However, instead of starting off light and slowing going up through the different styles of strokes, the sprints ordered him to exclusively use the butterfly slide, the most difficult swimming stroke to learn. The slide was the most demanding and difficult as it works the entire body, with the arms are involved with pulling and pushing and recovering in quick succession while constantly performing a dolphin kick, which meant doing a small kick followed by a larger one. There was one saving grace, however. With Poseidon being one of the spirits and thus the ability to manipulate water being accessible to him, that meant he got power from the water, so while he could feel his muscles burn and strain while performing the stroke, he didn't get tired as long as he remained in the water. It also didn't hurt, he could breathe underwater, meaning the strain on his lungs lessened as well. And this was how Izuku spent his last year. Growing stronger physical and mentally, learning the basics in martial arts and preparing for the more advanced training ahead. Currently the boy had been throwing discus and javelins to practice throwing and aiming. Izuku was about to grab another javelin, but Hades spoke up before he could. Actually, Izuku, head for the quirk testing grounds. I think it's time we start something new. The king of Helheim instructed, with Izuku feeling giddy at the chance to start training new. Moving quickly over to the quirk training field, he found an empty spot where they wouldn't be bothered. With this done, Hades, Hajuan and Loki appeared in sprit form. Well, what are you going to teach now, senseis? Izuku asked, getting a smile from Hades, a grumble from Haji and a giggle from Loki. Today we begin your studies in magic. Hades instructed, getting an excited squeal from Izuku. Exciting, I know, but it's going to be difficult. Now ideally Odin would be the one teaching you magic, but in his words, Loki said before gaining a dour scowl. I won't teach that brat until he shows real promise. He mimicked before regaining the smirk. So if you want to learn from him, you've got to show him your worth. Loki challenged before clapping his hands. But for now, let's begin the lesson, shall we? He asked, getting a rapid nod from Izuku. Now you've already got a taste of magic with flight and portal manipulation, but there's still so much more than that. The Norse god of deceit explained as he raised his hand as magic swirled around his hand. If you can think it, and if you have the power and knowledge, anything is open to you through its use. Loki explained. And it all starts with the basics. Basic illusions, and materialization along with elemental manipulation are all great ways to expand and get your magic under control. Loki told his student, who was hanging on to every word. So which one will I be learning first? he asked with barely contained excitement as Loki gained $1 million smile. None of them. He revealed, laughing at the crushed expression on Izuku's face. Seeing Loki giggling up a storm, Hades sighed as he continued. What you will be learning is actually one of Hajuin's techniques, he said, gesturing to the demon. It's a basic and simple one, but it will help your body adapt and get used to the magic following through it, he said before turning to Hajuin. Take it away, he instructed with the demon grunting. Watch closely, boy, Hajuin ordered as he extended his finger to the empty lot as a red energy covered it. Izuku watched in awe as the energy built and built until finally Hajuin fired. Izuku watched as the blast fly through the air, and just like with the tree from over a year ago, Izuku watched what would have happened if the blast was real, as a massive crater was created that seemed to go down for miles until it faded. Hajuin turned towards Izuku before he started to explain. The demon gun, by channeling magic into my fingers I can let it loose as pure energy, resulting in a massive explosion and damage. Like Hades said, so simple and basic yet so beneficial at the same time. The demon explained as Izuku nodded and held up his finger. Charge up magic in your finger, not all of it, just enough to fire. Use too much and you'll do nothing but blow yourself up, the demon warned, getting a gulp and a nod from the green-haired boy. The boy faced the firing range as he tried to store energy in his finger, while not letting it overload. Not too much, not too much, not too much, Izuku thought as he tried to keep the energy from building up. However, a sudden spike in power flowing through his finger caused him to panic and try to fire it. Boom, only for it blow up in his face and knock the 5-year-old on his butt with a dazed expression. Hajuin just sighed in annoyance. They had a lot of work to do. Line break. A few months later. The past few months have seen an increase both in difficulty and effectiveness for Izuku's training. For the next 2 weeks after Izuku had started practicing the demon gun, Izuku fell into a new routine. On days he had school, his morning routine would remain the same up until the school day was over and he headed to the gym. Once he got there, however, his training had slightly changed. Half of his time were for his martial arts classes while the other half was spent working on his magic and demon gun. On his days off, however, he would head straight for the gym, and after a couple of hours of physical training he would spend the rest of his days working on the demon gun. For the first 4 days each blast without fail kept blowing up in his face, making him more and more frustrated with each failure at being unable to control the power flow. It wasn't until late in the 5th day did he launch one completely by accident. He had been distracted for the briefest of moments, but in the moment Izuku launched a small but well done demon gun. Izuku stared at his finger transfixed for several seconds until a wide smile appeared on his face as he jumped for joy at having successfully, albeit accidentally, fired the demon gun. The 6th and 7th days were spent trying to copy the feeling he had in his finger, adjusting the magic until it was exactly like it had been on that one successful shot. The 8th, 9th and 10th day were spent firing the magic out of his body safely without damaging anything he didn't mean to. The 11th day he started to fire again, finally able to successfully fire off demon gun, even if it did happen only 3 out of 10 times. On the 12th day it raised to 5 out of 10, the 13th it went up to 8 out of 10, and by the 14th day almost every demon gun was a successful shot. From there he began to expand into other magics. Those being illusions, basic elemental manipulation and materialization. Metallization was actually rather simple. Using magic he would create any object he wanted. He just needed to know what it was made of and how it functioned, and thanks to Tesla's tutoring Izuku knowledge was growing at a rapid pace, making this quite the useful bit of magic. Illusions were a bit trickier. They involved manipulating magic to fool the senses of those in a certain area. However, if the illusion as to weak, it could easily be seen through or shattered. And finally, with basic elemental manipulation. This was exactly as it sounded, controlling the forces of nature and a few others to do one's bidding. Many of the gods were capable of this, but all were supplied when it was Poseidon who volunteered to go first. Flashback: Izuku stood in silence in front of a lake that was near the gym, fidgeting slightly as Poseidon gazed upon him judgingly. The sea god himself was silent as he looked over his host. Against all odds the human child did manage to surprise somewhat with how he was taking to magic as well as the lessons from the others. Still somewhat was still only somewhat. So Poseidon decided to test the boy here and now. Should he pass he would continue to teach the boy, fail and this would be the last lesson the boy who ever received from the tyrant. Water is the most unpredictable and thus the unforgiving element there is. Poseidon began. It can be a simple ripple from a PND, he told him, and if Izuku didn't know better he was sure he saw the lake ripple slightly. Or. Poseidon continued on in a much harsher tone. It can sallow civilizations whole. Suddenly images of entire islands being submerged lost below the tide. Izuku was trembling slightly but managed to get his nerve back. Now listen carefully boy, if you want to continue these lessons. I want you to change something in this lake, the smallest change will do. I just need to notice it. Call in the tide, make some waves, summon a whirlpool. It doesn't matter what it is. Just cause a difference. The sea tyrant ordered, getting a nod from Izuku. I know you already know the basics of manipulating magical energy and what it feels like when it's flowing through you. Now focus that water and manipulate the water the same way you manipulate that magic. Poseidon ordered, getting a nod from Izuku as he concentrated on the water. For several seconds Izuku didn't have any idea of what he wanted to do. Part of him wanted to do one of the things Poseidon suggested, but he wanted to try and surprise the sea tyrant. But what can I do? My magic manipulation is basic and I can barely keep myself from blowing up like a balloon at times. He thought, frustrated only for his eyes to widen. That's it. He thought with excitement as he raised his hand towards the lake. Poseidon watched with a raised eyebrow, curious as to what the child was planning, and was actually surprised when near the center of the lake 5 spheres of water started to rise, getting bigger and bigger until finally bursting and falling back into the lake. Izuku huffed and puffed as he turned back to the god, who was silent for a moment before sighing. It wasn't completely terrible. He judged, finally causing Izuku to grin. As far as Izuku was concerned, that was high praise from the sea god. Flashback end lessons with Poseidon continued after that along with other gods. Apollo began to teach light and fire manipulation and magic, while Hades took care of earth and darkness, and Zeus began to teach the basics of wind. It wasn't just the Greeks who were teaching elemental manipulation. Thor was covering everything in lightning, while Anubis was able to cover ice. Rasputin also began his training, which amount to just increasing the strength of his grip. Along with Shiva, who began giving the boy dance lessons, and while fun, Izuku didn't really see the point of it. Shiva just gave him a smile and told him he would understand in the future through all the lessons it wasn't just about combat or training. Jack, Hermes, and Hades began to teach the boys etiquette and proper manners. After all, power means nothing if you have the personality of a troll whose nap was interrupted. However, Izuku has been off slightly lately, not letting up on the amount of effort or energy he was putting in. But his passion and drive had diminished, and everyone knew why. Izuku had began to do research and going through the stories and memories of the spurts in his head. It started off fine at first. Izuku would laugh at some of the more amusing adventures that the spurts had and marvel at the victories they would achieve. However, as time went on and he continued to read, the darker things got. Poseidon killing his brother. Sheen growing up surrounded by hatred and the death of his adoptive mother. Zero doing his best and still suffering to the point he almost attacked an innocent woman and child. The more he read, the more nervous and scared he got around a few of them. However, it all came to a head when he started learning about Jack. Or as the epithet he took from another, Jack the Ripper. Izuku had admired the spurts in his head since they first started training him. Their knowledge, their power, their personalities all screamed hero to the 5-year-old. Even after reading through their backstories and what they did, most of them would have been amazing heroes if they had chosen to do so. Jack, however, was different. Killed his mother and presumably his father and countless other people. True, he might have been a government agent and killed a lot of bad guys, including the true Jack the Ripper, but he only did it for a selfish reason and in some cases even refused to do his job because their color didn't interest him. Jack was a type of person Izuku had never met before, and if he was grown, he doubted he could understand the killer. That left with a tense atmosphere around Izuku, with none of the Sprits knowing or caring about the best way to solve it. It came to an head one day when Izuku was rather focused on his training that day that he didn't notice Jack materializing behind him and watched him train in silence for several moments. "You certainly are improving at a remarkable rate." The killer praised, only to frown at the slight flinch the boy gave before he continued. "Something I can help you with, Mr. Jack?" Izuku asked, not looking towards the Englishman, who gave a sigh. "My boy could chat for a moment," he requested, and after a brief moment Izuku nodded as Izuku moved to the side and sat down. Jack, despite not having to sit, did so anyway with a sigh. "I'd like to apologize to you, Izuku." Jack started off, surprising the young man. "I knew you were looking through our history and I thought you'd think nothing of what I'd have done," the killer said with a sigh. "I'd had forgotten, with the drive and passion that you'd shown during this past year, that you were still a young boy who's still learning what the world truly is like." Jack sighed as he placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. Izuku said nothing but didn't shrug the hand off either. Finally he spoke in a quiet voice. "Why did you do it?" he asked, looking up at the man with tears. "Why did you have to kill those people? What did they do to you to make you want to kill them?" He asked the questions that have been burning his mind. Jack just smiled a sad smile. "They did nothing to deserve dying. Well, most of them. I admit there were a few times I did have some personal feeling involved in the matter," Jack admitted, with Izuku nodding, remembering that some of the victims could easily be considered villains. "As for why I did it, the reason for that is simple." Izuku leaned forward, eager to finally get an answer from the man. "It's because I'm a monster." And whatever hope Izuku had to understand crashed down. "Don't be surprised or too disappointed, my boy, it's simple the way things went. I may not have been born this way, but I could have stopped my killings at any time I choose. Yet I continued down the path I decided to walk, despite knowing of the pain, fear and ruined lives it caused." Jack shook his head with a small smile. "If that's not what a monster, then I don't what is." Izuku looked down as he regarded Jack's words. "Do you think there's a way to save someone before they become monsters?" Izuku asked at last, as Jack hummed as he scratched his chin. "Perhaps there is, Izuku, perhaps there is. However, please keep something in mind," Jack said as he glanced towards Izuku with the utmost seriousness. "No matter how much you try and save someone, it will all amount to noting if they don't want to save themselves," Jack warned, causing Izuku to blink. "Why wouldn't someone want to be saved?" Izuku asked with all the innocence a 4-year-old could ask. Jack just smiled another sad smile. "You'll understand when you're older, my boy, I promise. Just keep what I said in mind," Jack requested as Izuku sat there for a moment before he scouting a little closer. "I will, Mr. Jack, I promise," Izuku told the Englishman, casting him to chuckle. "I know you will, my boy. I know." Line break. 2 years later, Izuku, age 7, "All right, little buddy, today we're going to add a little something new to your training menu," Buddha instructed at the end of another grueling day of training. Izuku tilted his head in curiosity. In the past 2 years Izuku's training has been changed quite a lot. While he still did the same warm-up exercises, it was now about every other day instead of just every day. That time was used to advance his training in his martial arts as well as advance his studies in his magic and elemental manipulation. He also began to learn a couple of new martial arts from the Sprits. Sakata started instructing him on a martial arts called the Nico style. The style is made up of 4 different katas, or forms, each of which must be fully mastered in order for the Nico style to be complete. This style places a high focus on adaptability and applicability. Many of the techniques are not set patterns, but rather basic principles which can be applied in multiple situations. The Nico style utilizes unique styles of training to maximize the user's physical conditioning. This includes underwater shadowboxing, which combines anaerobic exercise with water resistance, to improve muscular and cardiovascular functions. The other style he was now learning was from Lu Bu called the Kaiwan style. The Kaiwan style is an assassination style that originated in the Ryukyu Kingdom. It is a style that combines the traits of Okinawan karate, traditional Ryukyuan martial arts and Chinese wushu. The Kaiwan style places high emphasis on partial training, kata training, research of meridians, acupuncture points and qigong. However, the most extreme part of the Kaiwan style is the hand conditioning users undergo. With users spending most of their time training their hands by stabbing things like sandbags, bamboo poles and even stone, hand conditioning is performed every day without rest, even if the user's arm is broken or shredded. The Kaiwan style's training does not stop at the hands and feet, with every joint being trained over a ridiculously long period of time. They are at times solid enough to be used as a spear, and breaking them instantaneously is nigh impossible. The conditioning that users undergo gives them hands that are incredibly tough and extremely durable and fingers that are capable of punching through solid steel. I don't think I'll ever underestimate when someone says, "This'll hurt," again. Izuku whined in his mind as even after all the physical training he's done, the Nico and Kaiwan styles have been the most demanding by far. "Yo, you okay, little guy?" Buddha asked with a tilt of the head, getting a nod from the child. "Yes sensei, just thinking about my last couple of training sessions with Lu Bu sensei and Sakata sensei." Izuku explained, getting a grin from the strongest adolescent. "I'm sure." He chuckled. "So what it's going to be, sensei, more mediation?" Ever since Izuku turned 7, Buddha had Izuku start mediating to help him keep his mind clear and level-headed as his schedule got more full and chaotic. Buddha however shook his head. "Nah. What I want you to do is place your hands together like this." He instructed as he placed his plans together, which Izuku copied. "Good, now say a small prayer." He continued before uttering a small prayer under his breath. Once Izuku had done this, Buddha nodded. "Good, now throw a punch." He said before doing just that. Once Izuku had completed the sequence, Buddha told him what he expected of the young boy. "Now continue those 3 moments on a loop for an hour." Buddha instructed, getting a nod from the young boy as he did what he was told. An hour later Izuku was rubbing his arms as Buddha scraped his chin. 767 punches. "Not bad," he said before grinning at the young kid. "Just so you know, this is gonna be a part of your regular training from now on." Buddha warned, getting a nod from the Izuku. "Good to see you're on board. Now let's head back home, yeah? Your mom's been getting busy recently and it'll be nice to eat with her for a change," Buddha said, getting a smile from Izuku. His mom was becoming a well-known lawyer and getting more and more cases. Though that meant she was spending more and more time out of the house as of late. With his spirits high and excitement at having his family together for the first time in a while, he eagerly headed home. Line break. A couple of weeks later Izuku was bouncing around the deserted dojo in anticipation, excitement and glee evident in his tone and movement. And how could blame him? This was going to be his first swordsman lesson with Kojiro and Soji. Well, he certainly seems enthusiastic about it. Kojiro grinned and Soji smirking. "True, but we should really get started," he advised, getting a from the older swordsman. "And just how do you plan on getting him to settle down?" he challenged, with Soji's smirk growing. "Oh, that shouldn't be a problem." Izuku meanwhile, try as he might, couldn't contain his excitement as he was about to begin his new training. He probably would have continued jumping around had a sensation not run through his body. Did I dash? Did I just get cut? He thought, looking over his body for any injury, only to find nothing. "Oh, good instincts, that'll help you in learning how to use a sword," Soji commented as they approached the boy. "Right, now to get started, pick up the Bakken," Sasaki instructed as the boy who nodded and picked up the Bakken from the shelf. "Good, now before you can even learn the basics you need to learn and how to stand while wielding a sword." First start by spreading your legs out and placing one in front of the other while holding your sword with both hands. Soji commanded, getting a nod from Izuku, who got into a rough resemble of what his teacher instructed. After correcting and tweaking his form to an acceptable form, Soji nodded. Good enough for now. Now you're going to swing your sword down either 1,000 times or until you can't hold anymore. Whichever comes first. Kojiro instructed, getting a nod from Izuku, who began to do as he was instructed. Fortunately, with all the strength and endurance training he's done, he was to get it done in a little over 45 minutes. Panting and sweat dripping down him, Izuku turned to his instructors. Now that you have a feel for the basics, let's see how you deal with aiming that blade. Soji told Izuku as he pointed towards a training dummy. 100 strikes on the dummy. If it doesn't land where we tell you to hit, it doesn't count. Now get to it. The first division captain ordered, getting a sigh from Izuku. It was going to be one of those days, it seems. Line break. A few weeks later. So Izuku, did you hear? We've got a new kid in class. One of Izuku's friends told him one day as they headed for class. The now second grader blinked. Really? Where did you hear that? Izuku asked, with the kid shrugging. I overheard the teachers talking about it. Apparently he had problems at his old school. Izuku frowned upon hearing that as loud explosions rang throughout the hall. Now, whereas in many schools explosions would be a cause for alarm, this was met with groans of annoyance and complaints from mutants about their more sensitive ears. The four boys gave each other looks before heading along with a few others to see the source of the noise. And the source was a surprise to absolutely no one. With deadpan expressions they watched one of their teachers, a furious look on their face, scolding an enraged Katasuki who was standing over a down crying girl with a bruise on her face before dragging him away to the principal's office, leaving the boys sighing in annoyance. Katsuki had been homeschooled for both pre-K and kindergarten by his mother. However, when a big opportunity for her job opened up to her, Masaru convinced her to let Katsuki start attending school again while she took this opportunity. So you could only imagine what she felt when she got a call from the principal a mere 2 hours after dropping her son off for his first day of school, informing her he beat up a classmate. Man, is that guy ever going to grow up? One of Izuku's friends asked, getting an eye roll from another. Don't count on it. Another muttered before they headed for their classroom. Once classes had started, the teacher entered with her usual smile. Good morning, everyone, she said with her usual cheer. Now, before we begin today, we're going to have a new student joining us, she exclaimed, causing those that didn't know to whisper excitedly as the teacher turned to the door. You can come in now, she called as the door opened and the new student slowly walked in. It was evident almost instantly why the kid had problems in his previous school, as his entire head was that of Black Bird. Well, how about you introduce yourself to the rest of the class? The teacher suggested, with the boy looking around at the faces of his new curious classmates before muttering. Fumikage Tokoyami, he said quietly, and was about to say more until a raspy voice was heard. And I'm Dark Shadow. Suddenly a dark ethereal being emerged from Tokoyami's chest and took the form of a saw-bird creature. Woo-woo, was the collective gasp from the class in amazement as Izuku's eyes sparkled at seeing such an amazing quirk. Tokoyami, however, was scrambling. What did I tell you about just emerging like that? Tokoyami told the quirk, who glared back. I wasn't going to hide from your classmates, Fumi. They need to know how amazing I am. The quirk shouted back. Fumikage could only sigh before nervously facing his new classmates. I'm sorry for her, everyone. I can't stop her when she gets like this, the bird-headed student said, clearly embarrassed. She was the collective question running through the minds of the students, but before they could ask, the teacher stepped forward. Oh, don't worry about it at all, Tokoyami. Why don't you just take the empty desk in front of Midoriya? Midoriya, could you raise your hand? She requested cheerfully, with the green-haired boy raising his hand. Nodding his thanks, Tokoyami made his way over to his desk and the lessons for the day officially began. Line break. It was lunchtime, and so far Fumikage Tokoyami was satisfied with his lessons. Dark Shadow had behaved, and aside from a few curious looks his new classmates seemed friendly enough. Finally she's gone. Dark Shadow muttered as she emerged from Tokoyami as the bird-headed boy sighed. I don't know why you complain every time a lesson is over. You know we're just going to have many more. The boy said. Because I can. She laughed, causing Fumikage to sigh. So cool. This came from behind him, causing him to turn and see Izuku staring at Dark Shadow in amazement. Excuse me? Fumikage asked, unsure of what he just heard. This caused Izuku to burst. Your quirk is so cool. How strong is she? What can she do? Is there any other place she can emerge from? Izuku asked all this in rapid succession. Fumikage for his part was taken back by the questions. Never before has anyone taken such an interest in Dark Shadow. Most were actually afraid of her due to her strength and capabilities. The quirk for her part was basking in the praise and attention and was about to start some serious bragging when Izuku's friends came up to him. Sorry about that. When Midoriya sees a new quirk he goes full-blown quirk geek. One of them told the avian-headed kid while Izuku laughed unabashedly. Sorry about that. He said before extending his hand. I'm Izuku Midoriya. He introduced himself as Fumikage stared at Izuku's hand unsure, causing Dark Shadow to groan. Give me a break. She muttered before taking Izuku's hand in her own. Don't worry about him, he has no social skills at all. I'm Dark Shadow and this is my ride, Fumikage. The quirk introduced herself and causing Fumikage to snap out of his funk. Shut your beak. He muttered before turning to the group of laughing boys. I'm Fumikage Tokoyami. He properly introduced himself. After the rest of the introduction were made, the four boys started eating their food. Man, Tokoyami Dark Shadow is such an awesome quirk. Much cooler than mine. One of the boys said as he extended his fingers, getting a nod from the other boy. Yeah, both you and Midoriya are definitely gonna be heroes when you grow up. He said, a tiny note of jealousy in his voice before sighing. Wish I was that lucky. He muttered as his hair went through various styles. Tokoyami blushed at the praise as he looked down meekly. Thank you. He said before looking to Izuku, so may I ask what your quirk is? He requested only for fingers and hair to answer instead. Unfair. They said together, causing Fumikage to look at them in confusion and Izuku to blush in embarrassment. They have a point. Kojiro pointed out, causing Izuku's blush to deepen and only reddened further when he noticed everyone's attention was on him. Well, my quirk is unique. It lets me do a variety of things and makes me stronger than normal. Izuku explained, not wanting to try and explain exactly what his quirk was. Luckily the groups were other 7-year-olds and not as mentally trained as his other peers, so didn't ask any more questions. Besides, it's not like I'm just going to be using my quirk to become a hero. Izuku reminded his friends and hopeful new friend. Fingers and hair nodded, but Fumikage looked confused. Seeing this, Izuku decided to explain, so you've heard of the Tokugawa gyms, right? Izuku asked, getting a nod from the bird-headed boy. Well, I go there a lot, all the time. The two friends interrupted at the same time, knowing it was rare for Izuku to not go to the gym to train in some shape or form. Anyway. Izuku continued, not wanting to face any further embarrassment. Me and my sister train there to become heroes. I'm learning Judo, Muay Thai, and Lingshu Chin Na, and my sister is learning Judo and Jiu-Jitsu. Izuku explained. Yeah, the place is awesome. Fingers exclaimed. They've got classes for just about anything. Me and my family have a membership and it's great. He said with hair nodding. Same with me, I'm taking a karate class and it's so much fun. He gushed, causing Fumikage to hum. From there the boys went on to different topics, from their favorite heroes to their favorite kind of stories. Turns out Izuku and Fumikage were big fans of horror. Soon though it came back to heroics and Izuku asked Fumikage a particular question. So are you and Dark Shadow going to be a tag team? Izuku asked, causing Fumikage and Dark Shadow to blink in confusion. Tag team, tag team. The duo asked together, getting a nod from Izuku. Yeah, most heroes have to fight alone, but you've got a partner with your quirk. The two of you could be an unstoppable if you could get the teamwork down, especially if you include martial arts. Izuku suggested, and the two other boys were marveling at the thought. That would be amazing. You gotta do it, man. Fumikage hummed before turning to Dark Shadow. What do you think? He asked, getting a shrug from the quirk. Could be helpful in the long run. She muttered, not caring either way. Seeing that as a go-ahead, Fumikage turned to Izuku. Do you know anyone who is willing to take a disciple? He asked. Izuku's grin was the stuff of nightmares. And that's how less than a week later both Apachai Hapachai and Kensei Ma each gained a new disciple. Line break. A few months later. Alright Izuku, today's lessons is going to be important, so make sure you pay attention. Beelzebub instructed, getting a nod from his young host. In the past few months the training has increased again somewhat. Zeus had him use materialization to create heavier and more dense objects to test his strength against. Shiva has also started Izuku's training in what he called elemental bending, where the elements can be manipulated through certain martial arts styles that are reminiscent of the qualities of the element itself. Currently Shiva has him working on the 4 basic elements: air, fire, earth, water, before he moved on to the other elements. When Izuku asked what the difference between bending and elemental manipulation was, and Shiva explained that while bending was a mix of physical and spiritual prowess while elemental manipulation was purely magical. It wasn't just fighting and combat prowess that he was learning. Hermes had begun teaching him more mundane skills such as musical and culinary arts, and if Izuku was being honest, that was some of the hardest training he's had yet. Back in the present, Izuku was giving his full attention to Beelzebub. The man was distant, but he took the young boy's training and education very seriously. Yes, sensei, what will we be learning today? He asked as Beelzebub materialized in his astral form. Today we will start your training in one of my arenas of specialty. Beelzebub said as he raised his hand as an aura seemed to cover it. Vibration manipulation. The Lord of the Flies told his young student. I can vibrate my body at very high frequencies. I can then use these vibrations as a weapon to easily cut and destroy my surroundings. I can also infuse my vibrations into my weapons, increasing their destructive power in the process. Beelzebub explained as Izuku stood there watching in awe as Beelzebub moved his hand gently around. After watching for a few seconds, the sin of gluttony stopped as he lowered his hand. Now what I want you to do is start by channeling energy into your hand and then start shaking it at a rapid pace. Beelzebub instructed, getting a nod from Izuku. Doing as he was told, a green energy covered his hand. Okay, that's done. Now for the vibrating. Izuku thought as he started to try and vibrate his hand. For several minutes nothing of note happened as Izuku more or less was simply shaking his hand, feeling more and more embarrassed. He did spare a few glances towards Beelzebub, but the sin was stone-faced as he watched the child attempt his technique. A few more minutes and Izuku couldn't help getting more and more frustrated. What am I doing wrong? Izuku couldn't help but ask as he stared at his hand, which he was still shaking, and wonder why it wasn't working. It doesn't even look like sensei's. He pouted as unlike the mass of energy around Beelzebub's hand, it was more like a cloud. Luckily Beelzebub seemed to finally show Izuku some mercy as he muttered. I don't seem to recall telling you to channel energy around your hand. Beelzebub spoke offhandedly, only confusing Izuku more. Not channel energy around my hand. But he did. Beelzebub sensei did tell me due to that. Izuku thought, only getting more and more frustrated the more he tried to figure out what his goth dressing teacher was trying to tell him. And then something clicked in his mind. Wait a minute. Sensei said I had to channel my energy into my hand. He thought before he glanced towards his hand. I was covering my hand with my magic like an armor, but maybe I should try something like this. Izuku thought as he tried to channel the magic into his hand. And after a few seconds Izuku could see the change as the vibrations started become more sporadic like Beelzebub's were. I did it. He cheered, turning to his sensei who was watching with crossed arms. Do you see, sensei? I did. Izuku interrupted himself with a scream as a massive gash appeared as Izuku was cradling his hand and letting the sun heal it. Beelzebub hummed. And this is why we don't lose focus during training or while we're performing such dangerous techniques. Beelzebub lectured. Remember, Izuku, what you're learning will only get more dangerous from here for both others and yourself. You'll need to learn to either multitask while keeping your focus on everything or mstr a technique to such a degree you could do it in yourself simply on instinct. Understand? He asked with the tone of a teacher who had accepted more out of his student. Izuku was fighting back tears both from the pain and the lecture as his hand healed itself. I'm such an idiot. Sensei and everyone else are masters at these techniques and I was happy I was able to do it just once and after Sensei had to correct me. He thought before quickly wiping his tears away. Well, no more. I try harder than ever before. I do whatever it takes to be a hero. He declared to himself before facing Beelzebub. Sorry sensei, I just got excited is all, but it won't happen again. Izuku promised with a smile that made Beelzebub freeze because for just a moment it wasn't Izuku he was looking at but his friend Lucifer. Sensei. Izuku questioned and then Lucifer was gone leaving the two alone. Beelzebub sighed but still had a small smile on his face. It's fine to be happy or excited when you accomplish something, Midoriya. But you most always keep trying to move forward ahead while keep focus on your objective. Beelzebub told his student with Tesla, who was one of the vestiges also listening and nodded in complete agreement. Of course sensei, I'll always remember that. Izuku promised before getting back to work with Beelzebub continued to watch on with a small smile and a little more hope for the future. Line break. A few weeks later. It was a calm day. Izuku found himself sitting down across from Susanoo in a small area under a few sakura trees who gave a lazy grin. Well, it's about time you. And I had a lesson. He muttered with a bit of a chuckle with Izuku agreeing wholeheartedly. Susanoo was the supreme god of the Shinto pantheon and while his skills were top-notch it was only now that Izuku was deemed fit to start training with the man. Now let's let our first lesson be something fun. The Stormcaller suggested, getting an excited but hesitant nod from Izuku. This wasn't the first time one of his teachers told him their lessons would be fun, and it usually ended with him exhausted and in a lot of pain. Susanoo must have guessed what he was thinking because he let out another small chuckle. Relax, this is a purely magic-based technique. Thought it will require a lot of focus if you don't want it to backfire on you. The Storm God warned, getting a gulp and nod from Izuku. Now watch closely. He said as the air around seemed to fluctuate and turn rapid. Susanoo, lazy grin still on his face, merely glanced towards the trees around him. Izuku watched transfixed as the air seemed flow around the trees. Like all the times before, nothing happened to the actual trees, but Izuku was able to see what would have happened had the attack been real. And boy was it something. The imagery forest was gone, having been completely sliced and diced to ribbons before being completely annihilated, and it was then Izuku understood what he had seen earlier. Blades. Thousands or maybe millions of tiny near microscopic blades that can slice anything to nothing. He thought, his mouth gaping at the thought. A pretty handy technique, and one I refined when I was facing the Yamtano Orochi, Susanoo explained before readjusting his hat. Now then, the trick is pretty simple. Imagine blades surrounding you, blades so small that you can barely see. The storm god instructed as the air once more seemed to fluctuate. Small enough to be barely seen for what they are, but not too small for them to be inconsequential. And then with that image clear in your mind, use materialization to bring them into existence. Susanoo explained as the air began to frenzy again. Nodding again, Izuku did as he was asked. In his mind he pictured the simplest of blades in his mind, trying to think of it being small enough to be hard to see but large enough for them to be of use. Closing his eyes, Izuku focused everything on what he was visualizing. Doing so caused the magic around to start to move erratically. Before long Susanoo could see the blades start to form. Good, now focus on where you want to go and cut. Susanoo instructed, getting a nod from Izuku, who was now focusing more and more on what his sense was saying. A few seconds later the blades went floating through towards the trees where some of the branches were cut from the trees. Susanoo nodded, satisfied. Good work. Now try to dash. It was here, however, when the storm god saw that the blades were starting to act a little sporadic and seemed to jerk at places. Alright Izuku, that's enough, reel it in. He ordered, only to notice Izuku's look of intense concentration but also panic. I can't, sensei. There's too many. Izuku cried, trying his best to not lose control of the power. Susanoo's widened a fraction for a second before he shot towards Izuku and slammed his fist on top of Izuku's head. The pain and the force sent Izuku flying back, but luckily it did what it was supposed to do. With a groan Izuku sat up. Thank you, sensei. You really saved me. He told the Straw Hat God, who merely rubbed the back of his head wordily. Don't mention it, Izuku. He told him before his eyes narrowed. But what happened? You're usually so careful, I can't see why you would lose control now. Susanoo questioned, knowing that Izuku would never go against his or any of the others' instructions. Izuku just looked down in shame. I'm sorry, sensei, I was just so happy that I managed to do it. I lost track of a few of the blades, and by the time I noticed them I panicked and the others started to get out of control. Izuku admitted as Susanoo sat down next to him and let out a sigh of annoyance. But it wasn't towards Izuku. Kid, trust me, you're not the one who messed up here. That would be me. Susanoo told his student, who looked towards him in confusion. Really? He asked, getting a nod from Susanoo. Yeah, he says with a bit of a guilty smile. That would be me. He admitted in a sheepish tone, causing Izuku to blink in confusion. You, sensei. But you explained it great and I was able to do it until I messed up. How is that your fault? Izuku questioned, getting a small laugh from Susanoo. Because I forgot I made the same mistake when I was your age. Susanoo told the young boy, who was left gaping at Susanoo in complete disbelief. The storm god, seeing this, couldn't help the laugh that escaped him. It's true, I did. He admitted before a small smile rested on his face as he watched the sakura petals fall. Izuku. I guess it never really accrued to you, but all of us, gods, Valkyries and humans, weren't always as strong as we are now. We all had to start at the bottom and work our ways to the top. Whether it be Odin and Loki with magic, Lu Bu and Raiden with their physical might, or Tesla and Beelzebub with their knowledge. Each had to work beyond the point everyone else would have given up. Here Susanoo turned to Izuku. And through all that time we messed up time and time again. It's part of the process. The expression maybe practice makes perfect, but so does failure. It makes us grow and shows us where we need to improve. Susanoo then gave Izuku a grin. And it also gives us the chance to find new and creative ways to grow. Understand? He asked, getting a grin and nod from Izuku, causing Susanoo to ruffle his hair. So you want to give it another try, or maybe put it on hold till another day? Susanoo asked, with Izuku giving a moment of thought shook his head. Maybe we should wait a while before we try this again. Izuku muttered, getting a nod from Susanoo. Same thing I did. Nothing wrong with walking away for now. Susanoo told Izuku as the young boy started to walk away and back towards the gym. How did you get past this anyway? Izuku asked, with Susanoo scratching his chin in thought. I used a medium of visual for the blades to take the form of. That way I could keep track of each and every one of them until it became second nature. Susanoo explained. So maybe try and find a medium or visual you can see. Susanoo suggested, with Izuku humming as a few sakura petals fell into his hand. A visual, huh? Line break 2 months later. Battle time. Battle time, battle time, battle time, battle time, battle time, battle time. Soji's song did not help Izuku's nerves as he stood in an empty clearing after his warm-ups. His teachers hadn't told him anything about this new method of training, and considering how they were usually completely upfront with him with what his training would entail, he couldn't help the chill that went up his spine at the implications. It didn't get any better when Leonidas, someone who outside of basic training and his style of boxing hasn't had that much hands-on training with Izuku yet, was leading the lesson. "Alright kid, now today we're going to begin your combat training," the Spartan king announced, and Izuku's blinked once and then twice before letting out a loud "H." "That's right kid. By this point in our lives many of us began training in actual combat. All the training you've done is fine and all, but that doesn't mean SHT if you don't know how to actually use it in a fight," the rebellious king explained, getting a nod from Izuku. "Makes sense. So do you want me to go one of the training rooms and request a match?" Izuku asked, getting a smirk and head shake from Leonidas. "Hell no. We're not wasting our time on those little pansies. We've got a much better method," Leonidas promised before letting out a chuckle. "Tell me, have you ever heard of imaginary fighting?" Leonidas asked, getting a shake of the head from Izuku. "Well, to be blunt, it's when you fight against something that you conjure up in your mind," Leonidas explained. "It could be in a bully you want to beat, and a seemingly endless army, or something that's extinct like a dinosaur. The more you understand it, the more real it will become, and the stronger you'll get from facing it," the king explained with an excited grin. Izuku, however, was skeptical. "Are you sure this will work, sensei? I mean, how does fighting against something in your imagination count as combat training? You can't get killed, you can make stop the fight at any time you want. Heck, you can even decide what they do and how they move. So I just don't see dash." A fist to the face interrupted Izuku's question, causing the long boy to get sent flying back and slamming into a tree, causing it to tumble down. Izuku got up as he shaky got to his feet while using magic to heal his nose as Leonidas stood there, his fist extended. "Did that feel imaginary, brat?" the Spartan king questioned, getting a groan and head shake from Izuku. "Didn't think so. Now you've studied my memories and have a general idea of how strong they were, right?" Leonidas questioned, getting a nod from Izuku. He had studied the armies and how they fight of all the generals and soldiers of the vestiges to a great extent, wanting to get a better idea of how they fight. Training in the same manner of how a Spartan would only help further his understanding. "Good, now conjure a 21-year Spartan up in your mind and bring it to life using your imagination." Leo, getting a grunt from Izuku, who was still skeptical of the whole thing but did as he was told. Closing his eyes, Izuku did as the Spartan asked and conquered of what he could understand a typical 21-year Spartan soldier. True, he couldn't know exactly how strong they were, but seeing Leonidas' memories and expresses, he was able to form a rather close duplicate, he'd like to think. And now the hard part. Izuku, with a sigh of annoyance as he tried to somehow bring it to life. "Not that I would have any idea of how to do that," he thought in annoyance as he tired to do what he was told. Minutes passed and, like Izuku was expecting, nothing happened, causing Leonidas to sigh in annoyance. "Would you stop fighting it? The whole reason it hasn't appeared yet is because you don't believe it will come. There's very little difference between that and us appearing," Leonidas explained. "Just get into a fighting stance and believe that a Spartan will appear. That he will appear and be ready to fight," Leonidas instructed, and this time Izuku nodded a bit more confidently. Taking up a basic fighting stance, Izuku waited and believed the Spartan would appear. That he would appear, and when he did so, Izuku would be forced to fight against him. For maybe 10 seconds nothing happened, but then slowly but surely Izuku felt a slight change in the air, as if an ominous cloud was now hanging over him. And then approximately 30 seconds after Izuku began to concentrate, it appeared. Shimmering into existence, it whirled around. A transparent colorless glob that seemed to desperately take shape. "That's it. You've almost got it. Now just take that image of the Spartan in your head and project it onto the glob. That should finish the process," Leo explained as Izuku did as the ancient king instructed him. After a few more seconds the glob froze before shifting up and expanding, and Izuku triumphantly as a Spartan now stood ready and willing to fight. Leonidas laughed, "Well done. Now fight." Leonidas ordered, and as if it had been waiting for those words the Spartan roared and charged forward, its dory spear ready to maim. Izuku didn't waste a second and kept into the air to avoid the attack before going for a kick to the Spartan chest. The Spartan raised its shield to block and Izuku's kick slammed into it. What the heck? Izuku thought as he could actually feel the weight of the shield and the Spartan behind it as he pushed it back. How is that possible? It's only in my head. Izuku thought in disbelief. Unfortunately, Izuku's distracted state allowed the Spartan to reposition his spear and move it through Izuku's shoulder. Crying out in pain as gushed from the wound, Izuku clutched the wound as the Spartan turned and threw a Spartan kick directly into the young boy's chest, sending him hurtling through the air and through more than a couple trees. As Izuku sat there shaking in pain and shock, Leonidas approached him with an emotionless expression. He's not real, he can't hurt me. He's just a figment, nothing to be concerned about. Those were the thoughts running through your head just now, weren't they? Leonidas questioned while Izuku looked down, not being able to look him in the eye as he healed his wounds. Just because you don't think something can hurt or kill you, a soldier must never drop their guard. Remember, boy, the moment you let yourself be at ease on a battlefield is the moment you're allowing yourself to die, regardless of how strong you are. Leonidas lectured as stood in front of Izuku. Also, how long are you just going to keep sitting there? In a real fight you would have died the moment your back hit the ground. Leonidas roared before turning to look at the Spartan. And yet it just stands there waiting patiently. Are you going to sit there and let this mockery continue, or will you stand up and show what you'll do to those that look down on you? Leonidas questioned as Izuku began to grit his teeth as he shakily got to his feet. I'm sorry I made you wait, sensei. Izuku panted out as tired because of the magic he had to use to heal his wounds. But I swear I will never let anyone look down on me again. And I'll make sure to never lower my guard again. Izuku declared as he glared at the Spartan who was ready for the next fight. Leonidas nodded but kept his face neutral. Good to hear, but talk is cheap. If you really mean that, then take down your opponent already. The Spartan king roared as Izuku charged forward. The Spartan charged as well and once more swung his spear, however this time Izuku ducked and while it was still in range chopped the spear from its pole. Izuku wasn't fazed anymore with feeling the actual wood, nor was he faced when moved to grab the other end of the spear and felt the weight of the metal in his head. Izuku went low and tried to aim the spearhead at the Spartan's chest, but once more the warrior blocked with their shield. However, Izuku grinned when he saw the wince of pain on the Spartan's face. Izuku went in for a punch only to jump back when once the Spartan drew their ziphos. Izuku eyed the short sword wearily but still crouched down before charging forward. The Spartan brought his sword down but Izuku jumped to his side. However, once the Spartan started rising his hand to swing again, Izuku quickly gripped it with both hands and squeezed with both hands until he felt the non-existent bones shatter. The Spartan clutched his hand in pain while Izuku jumped into the air and pulled his fist back and punched. The punch instantly shattered the Spartan's helmet and sent him hurtling to the ground, fading before they even hit the ground, leaving Izuku panting as he landed and stared at his disappearing opponent before the sound of clapping reached his ears. Well done. Leonidas praised, a proud grin on his face as he approached. I knew sending you up against a Spartan, no matter how much a greenhorn, was a good idea. He laughed. And that iron breaker wasn't bad either. Sakata muttered, admitted rather pleased Izuku was getting a hang of the Nico style. Regardless, this will be a new regular factor in your training. Facing off against different kinds of enemies and even species as well as stronger versions of those you already faced will help you grow even more. This is the benefit of imaginary fighting. Simo explained, getting a nod from Izuku, a rather resigned grin on his face as he turned to Leonidas and asked the only thing he could. So who am I fighting next? Line break. 3 years later, Izuku aged 10. His dreams were filled with conflict. From minor scuffles between two gangs to all-out war, Izuku's dreams rang with the drums of war. Egyptians, Chinese, Americans, Japanese, Russians, men and women of all ages and races were shown fighting for their lives in endless conflicts. Fire fights, naval combat, air battles, guerrilla tactics, bombings. Izuku also bore witness to some of the worst humanity has ever had to sink to when it came to winning a war. Torture, brainwashing, attacking innocent civilians. Nothing was spared from his eyes as he was forced to watch each atrocity unfold. And it wasn't just humanity's wars he was forced to watch either. The Titanomachy, the Gigantomachy, the civil wars between the pantheons before the untied together. It kept going until finally Izuku was able to behold Ragnarok itself and witness the events that sent all his teachers here in the first place. Happening again, huh? Good grief. Buddha muttered lazily as he materialized into the dreamscape and with a snap of his fingers dispelled it. This allowed Izuku to drop to the ground back in the arena as most of the spurts surrounded him with looks of sympathy being most prominent. Geez kid, you just have the shittiest luck sometimes, huh? Shiva couldn't help but mutter before looking away as many directed an annoyed glare towards the Hindu god. I just wish I knew the cause. I mean, these are different from the dreams I used to have. Izuku muttered. Since his quirk first awakened and Tesla began his lessons, he hasn't had a dream. It wasn't until just after his 10th birthday when these dreams began and one of the spurts had to actively step in and stop them. The spurts looked towards each other as if having a silent conversation before Brunhild let out a grunt and stepped forward. Actually, we do know the cause of the dreams, she admitted, and Izuku's eyes went wide hearing this while Brunhild released a sigh. Izuku, you're turning into a god. Izuku sat there and blinked once and then twice before lilting his head and managed to let out a confused, "Excuse me." Hades was the one who answered this time. You're becoming a god, at least a half-god. The king of Helheim answered. Much like Hercules and the Valkyries, you have both divine and mortal energy running through you thanks to us. However, due to the ratio and difference, I would say you'll end up 2-3 god and 1-3 human. He theorized. Izuku nodded absent-mindedly before asking his next question. When were you going to tell me about this? Izuku asked, and Loki had the gall to give cheeky smile. Would you believe us if we said when you were older? He asked, only to get a punch to the head by Thor. We were kid, believe us, but we weren't expecting something like this to start until you were at around. But since someone. Here Buddha stopped and took a glance towards Zeus, who grinned unapologetically. Decided to kick off everything early. Everything was pushed forward as well. Though we didn't expect it to happen this soon. Izuku nodded at the information. Okay, that makes sense, but that doesn't explain all of these dreams. Izuku muttered. Actually it does. As a demigod you'll still have a domain you can draw power from. In this case, that being war. Hades corrected as Izuku felt his breath still. War. He whispered, getting a nod from Hades. Indeed, all small fights to the mass wars, all that fits into the war domain. And it's that domain and the smaller domains that fall into that will be yours to command. The king of hell explained. Okay, but why war of all things? Only Lord Odin is a war god, and even then that's one of his minor domains. Izuku asked, and this time it was Loki the one who answered through his snickering. Oh, you have only Cliff Chin to thank for that. He giggled, confusing Izuku only more while it was Hermes who answered this time. He is referring to my brother Ares, the god of war. He actually should have been sent here with us, considering he was with us there at the end, but it appears he got lost along the way. The messenger god explained. How did he get lost? Izuku asked, only getting a smirk and shrug from the messenger. Regardless of that, we recognize the power radiating off you as the same that radiated of him, that being war. Poseidon added on, getting a nod from Izuku. So do I need to do anything with it now or dash? He trailed off, seeing multiple of the sprits shake their heads. No, we're leaving it alone for now. The power will unlock when it's ready and we can teach from there. Brunhild informed, getting a nod from Izuku. Besides, you have enough to worry about right now anyway, don't you think? Buddha had questioned, getting a tired sigh from Izuku. From ages 7 to 10 Izuku manly focused on what they had already began to teach him already. Improving his magic and nature manipulation, further mastering the martial arts, body and mind, while also working on the skills such as his work with vibrations or the miniature blades. Now that he is 10, however, they decided to start instructing him on new topics once more. Many of which were purely educational to further improve his knowledge, and began to learn advanced skills such as engineering from Tesla as well medical knowledge from Beelzebub. Leonidas also began to teach him about all manners of warfare, having studied the complete history of war after he died, and was now making sure Izuku knew all there was to know about warfare, with Hercules often lending a hand to assist. Another facet of his training was began to train with more and more weapons. Lu Bu's, Hades and Poseidon's pole arms, Hercules' club, Thor's hammer. Izuku began to learn the basics of all these weapons, while the others were to be saved for later. Izuku also began to train with the Valkyries in their powers, and has managed to preform Volundr with 3 of them. Those being Gyrolo the 5th Valkyrie, Alvatar the 10th Valkyrie and Hlok the 11th Valkyrie. For Gyrolo, her ability was to morph anything into a spear and give it long-range capabilities. Her Volundr took the form of a wakizashi. The hilt is light blue with its suba made of 2 slim swirls of metal looping around the blade to make an open oval, resembling an S. At first Alvatar and Hlok mocked their older sister for such a lame-looking form, but before the proudest Valkyrie could murder her sisters, Izuku activated the weapon's ability. The result was the forest surrounding them being toppled, and Gyrolo to sport the biggest SHT-eating grin she could as she turned towards her sisters and asked if they had anything else to say about her form. Their silence was music to her ears. Next to her and Volundr was Alvatar, whose power allowed Izuku to greatly increase his defense against his opponents and greatly reduce the damage they do, allowing Izuku to focus more attacking without worrying too much about defense. For her Volundr transformation, it took the form of a golden amulet. When in this form, Izuku's defense further increased against melee damage. However, the greatest effect came when he faced an emitter. Izuku could absorb the attack by having it hit the fleece before directing back towards his opponent. However, Hlok was a bit of an issue. Her form took a pair of dark emerald gloves and the transformation was successful, but that's where the problem started. Hawk's power was to turn anything she touched into a divine weapon. A boon to be sure, but Izuku would have to be extremely careful. A divine weapon could break through anyone's defense, but if Izuku were to lose track of it, then the weapon could wind up in the wrong hands. The last thing Izuku started learning was environmental combat from Simo. This entailed disappearing and camouflaging himself to match the environment, while also learning to traverse and navigate the surrounding area, while also making use of everything it had to offer, whether that be for weapons, directions, or even medical supplies. Rasputin also started his training, teaching him about various poisons and started teaching him the ins and outs of the human body. It wasn't just him who had gotten stronger. Both Izumi and Fumikage had stated taking classes in Kendo, both wanting to learn to use weapons when training to be a hero. Izuku was snapped out of his thoughts when Odin stepped forward. Despite himself, Izuku couldn't help but gulp. Odin rarely if ever spoke to him, and even then it was often just to critique or criticize. "Boy. Starting tomorrow I will begin training you. Do not disappoint me," he threatened with a narrowed eye before turning and leaving as Izuku let out a stunned, "Why yes sir." He managed to squeak. The group fell into an awkward silence until Tesla with a winning smile clapped his hands together. "Well, with that out of the way, shall we begin tonight's lessons?" Tesla questioned, and Izuku was more than thankful for him. "Yeah, let's do it." Izuku agreed as he was quick to follow after the inventor. The group watched as the 2+ gondole went to their usual spot to begin their lessons. "Well, that was a pretty quick exit," Buddha muttered as he went to bring out a lollipop. "Well, you can't really blame the lad, can you? Considering what he just learned, I think he took it quite well." Jack defended their host. "To be fair, we had expected this to come much later and thought it would come later," Regenleaf muttered, fixing her glasses. "Regardless, we have to deal with it and plan out future training and lessons according. Both to make sure he doesn't overexert himself, but to also make sure there are no accidents in the future." Hermes thought with a look that said he was already doing just that. Brunhild meanwhile was massaging her head to fight off a headache. "It never gets any easier, does it?" she muttered, with Soji letting out a laugh. "That's what makes it so fun." The first division captain laughed, which didn't help Brunhild in the slightest. Line break. Izuku's eyes opened slowly as he sat up and stretched as he let out a groan. What a wild night. Izuku thought as he hopped out of bed to get ready to start his morning training. He had just finished get dressed and looking in the morning, when his mind began to wonder. A demigod, he was turning into a demigod. Izuku never even imagined something like this would ever happen or could ever happen to him. And I even get to start learning from Odin today. Izuku thought beyond excited. Well, someone's eager. Just remember, dear Uncle Odin is a real hard butt, even more so than Poseidon. Loki warned, ignoring the growl he got from said sea tyrant. I know, Loki, it's just a hitch. Izuku interrupted himself with a lock scream as he looked back in the mirror and saw Loki's floating head in slightly above where his used to be. Loki blinked before looking and his eyes widened. What the hell? He muttered in confusion as Izuku came back to stare at him in disbelief. A few seconds later many of the Spritz heads appeared in the mirror. Now this is weird. Shiva muttered, never thinking he would see himself as just a head. What the heck is going on here? Gear questioned while Tesla was muttering at a rapid pace underneath his breath. Hades, however, was the one who answered. Well, it's often said that eyes are the window into the soul, so perhaps while Izuku looks into the mirror it allows us to present ourselves through it. He guessed, giving the best shrug a head could give. That theory had a lot of holes in it, but before anyone could debunk it Inko's voice was heard from outside the door. Izuku, are you okay? I heard you scream and it sounds like there are a lot of voices coming from your room. Inko said, and before anyone could react his door flew open and Inko walked in to see her soon talking with his reflection and over 20 disembodied heads floating in the mirror. Izuku. Inko stammered out at the most bizarre sight she had ever seen. Please explain. She ordered, and Izuku gulped. This wasn't going to be fun. Line break. So all these men and women are the people who have been teaching you? Inko asked after listening for the last 2 hours as Izuku explained everything after they moved into the living room where there was a big enough mirror for each of the spurts to manifest. Izumi, who was sitting beside her, was starry-eyed at seeing so many legends and myths in the flesh. She knew her brother's quirk was completely unfair, but to learn he got to learn from some of the greatest humans in history as well as a roaster of the top gods. She hosently has never been so jealous. As for Inko, well, she knew Izuku was learning from others outside the gym, but she didn't know by who. However, after her son kept insisting they had his best interest in heart and seeing him not only grow stronger but also smarter and more confident, she decided to let it continue. That is correct, ma'am. Adam confirmed, and Inko had to again shake her head and remind herself that this wasn't such a crazy dream. And is there a particular reason why you're doing this? I'm grateful, truly I am, but there has to be some reason. She pushed. Indeed, we each have our own reasons. Some more selfish than others, but I think that just extends to not wanting to die if Izuku gets killed. A good majority of us just want to see the boy's true potential. Kojiro reassured the mother as almost everyone nodded. However, Inko knew that not everyone was present. Out of the 43 spurts Izuku claimed, 4 were missing. Unknown to her, those 4 were Odin, Poseidon, Hajuan, and Jack. All of which Izuku was kind of glad to see absent. The first 3 because they might say or do something that won't help the situation at all, and Jack because he was pretty sure he knew what would happen if Inko learned he was being taught by a serial killer. Inko kept looking at the spurts before releasing a tired sigh, already feeling done with day despite having just woken up. I just don't know what due to. She muttered at lost. It's okay, Ms. Midoriya. We've kinda been playing this by ear as well. Zeno tried to reassure the mother. Inko allowed herself a small smile as gave a nod of thanks to the smallest of the gods. Believe me, Ms. Inko, when we say we have no ill intentions for your son. The very act would be completely hideous. Apollo tried to reassure the woman with Leo nodding. Hate to say it, but Sparkles here is right. Your son is a great Spartan in the making. We're not going to do anything to F that up. He swore only to get a hit to the head from Hurst for swearing in front of children. See Mom, these guys are amazing. So please let me keep training. They can help me become a better hero and keep you and Izumi safe. Izuku pleaded as Inko looked into her son's eyes. Trying to think of any reason to say no to her son but finding no reason to. So with a sigh she nodded. Just please be careful, Izuku. I know you want to become strong, but there's no reason for you to destroy your body. Inko pleaded towards Izuku, who grinned. Of course, Mom. I'll be careful. I don't want you to worry after all. Izuku promised, causing Inko to smile a little easier before going to fix herself and a hyper and newly motivated Izumi some tea. Well, it's nice to know we don't have to worry about running circles around your mom anymore. Shiva muttered as Loki let out a little chuckle. True, but just remember, Izuku, your hardest lesson is about to begin. Loki reminded him with an amused smile, and Izuku grinned, was burst with excitement. Why wouldn't it? His first lesson with Odin was today after all.